Well,
Hello, you handsome devil.
here we are. I find myself again in the company of the remarkably quick-witted Kurt Doolittle himself.
I'm not sure I'm quick-witted.
You're wickedly quick-witted.
I don't know about that. I really like that jacket and tie combination on you.
You're
We
very.
found your color, blue and
I have to
whatever
change it up. I have to change it up for the audience just to give them something different to look at while they're hitting like and subscribe and all the buttons below and leaving wonderful, glorious comments for us to enjoy later. You guys, you're doing good work. Kurt, you're hitting on all cylinders. I'm very pleased by our work. It's making me happy as pleased as punch.
Pleased as punch.
That's it. Go ahead. This is episode 2039, by the way. All right. What were you going to say?
I had a friend in college and after college named Kevin Post. He's in Massachusetts, absolutely wonderful human being. You know, what I wish every gay guy was like, right? Great friend, gives you great advice, whatever, but doesn't hit on you. Right? I absolutely love the guy. Anyway, he's a creative. What was I bringing that up?
That's a good point. I don't know. I wish I did.
I had to run down a couple of rat holes there.
That's all right.
Having gay guy, whatever.
We're just going along. We're starting episode 2039. You have it again? Do you recollect yourself?
No, I forgot what the hell I was going to say. It was probably it was tied to something.
That's good. That's so the audience is not thinking you're unattached somehow.
Huh? I didn't get it.
It's all right. It doesn't matter. You're well moored to reality, sir. Even though you're like a floating head in the black background of chaos, it's just okay. Here we are.
I have everybody knows I make a fun of this, but I have 30 of these white shirts, and about 20 black ones.
There you go. That shirt is not white, by the way, so you know.
No, I they're all Nordstrom shirts or some variation thereof.
Wonderful. Now I have a question to ask you. Since I was watching some of our previous work here, I was rewatching it, and I want you to describe. It seems like the basic functional element discovery is the concept of evolutionary computation.
Yes.
That seems to be the basis of all of this work.
Right. And of course, I'm not the only one who sees this.
Okay.
I usually refer to Wolfram.
Okay.
And Joshua Bach.
Right.
But it's slowly making its way into the field. The difference is that some of us were trained in computer science, and so we see the world, ready for the magic word, operationally instead of mathematically, which is a sort of form of idealism. Right, so math is more like an analogy, and operations are like reality.
That's very interesting.
And so those of us who are trained in computer science, I keep, Minsky said this, I think it might have been in the 80s, Marvin Minsky, who's, and it's in the introduction of one of his textbooks. I've just, I quote it all the time and I've forgotten which book it is. It's like one of his introductions to computer science is that we don't think of it this way, but thinking programmatically, like a computing an evolutionary computation, or in Markov chains or state machines, like Wolfram is trying to teach, or in models of AI, which is more like more philosophical, what Joshua Bach is trying to, we're sort of the three axes between Joshua Bach and me and Stephen Wolfram, three points of the compass, a triangular compass. And you get that from us. What you do see people like David Deutsch trying to sort of get there, and you see a couple of other people, but to abandon math in favor of computation, it's a huge change in human thought. And Minsky was trying to tell us that back in the 80s. And I think part of the problem is that that just like we had Minsky come through the 80s and Mandelbrot, both of these people were trying to tell us this computing stuff, we can do stuff we couldn't do before because it just wasn't possible for humans to perform that many calculations. Right? But it's sort of the same thing as programming. I mean, I had Scott Adams was on gave a talk yesterday on what's wrong with conservatives, basically, and what conservative concept of fatherhood or parenting, and it was true. And he was
You're gonna make me cry. Stop it.
What?
Just go on. You're gonna make me cry thinking about the concept of fatherhood.
Well, I mean, he's just saying that we're. I'm gonna lose my train of thought. But we were on this kick. We've got this thing where it's just good parenting. It isn't. There's some people that are still in the nurture over nature world, and they think if you're a good enough parent, your kids will all turn out fine. That's not true, right? You can be a perfect parent, and your kid can still be an axe murderer, right? So it's the same reason why don't some people get cured of, he's bringing up the problem of addiction, right? And the answer is because they're biologically broken, right? Period. And there's just no way to fix it. So the people that get better, it's their genetics that allowed them to get better. Sure, they had help, but you can't help a person that's biologically broken. They're going to commit suicide or by drugs or whatever. They're going to crash, and it's unfixable. The people that are fixable, it's not because of anything you did. It's because they're fixable.
I understand you, sir. And it's like there are among us irredeemably lost people. Correct.
I mean, there's nothing you're going to do about them. Anyway, so now that I've said that, I've forgotten what the fuck we were talking about.
We're on operational over mathematical.
Okay. So what was the question? Oh, your question started out is everything is reducible to evolutionary computation. I would say the correct framework of understanding the world is as actions, yes, evolutionary computation. In other words, what permutations are possible given the operations available to the universe at every scale of abstraction. In other words, every scale.
Doing that. I'm gonna have to write that quote down.
All right.
That was very good.
So think of it as the universe can only form so many puzzle pieces at every, right? Because we know basically it can only form one. Right. And so the problem is once you increase the energy by combining triangles, you get combinations that can fit with other puzzle pieces, other combinations. But there are combinations you can't have, right? So there are two problems that arise here. One is that some of those combinations are predictable, which means it's mathematically reducible, right? And some of them are not. They're only
irrational, right?
They're only operationally constructible. In other words, they're unpredictable, and they're not mathematically reducible. So the field of things that's capable of being produced by operations is larger than the field of things that can be produced mathematically.
By prediction, right?
Right? Because why? All of mathematics is statistical. In other words, it's always the average of something, right?
This is funny to me because it's like this. It's like the patient goes like this. Here's how the patient presents. This is with some frequency, okay? But what's the average? I'm like, it doesn't matter. It has no meaning in this context. It's like we're talking about you, not averages.
There is no average.
Abstractions, right? That's interesting. I like that. So
no, there's three. So realize there's a spectrum here. So there's the operationally impossible,
Yep.
There's the operationally possible.
Yep.
And of the operationally possible, there are some things that are mathematically reducible.
Some things.
Some things. In other words, think of it as sentences,
Yep.
right? I can tell you a general story,
Yep.
which is what we mean by a theory.
Right.
A theory that's mathematically reducible, right? Or no, it's a law, excuse me. That's what we mean by law. I can reduce something to a mathematical number, but not all laws are mathematically reducible. They're still theories, but they're not reducible to laws. Are they laws? Absolutely. But the way we define law is mathematically reducible. So I'm saying that you can't conflate these two things anymore. Something is just mathematically reducible because it's a regularity independent scale. Something is not mathematically reducible, but it's operationally constructible. And some things that are not operationally constructible. And in the ideal world, there is some universe of maximally operationally constructible. One of the current questions, let's just give this as the example, is we tend to think of the periodic table as relatively closed, complete. But let's just hypothetically say there might be older stars that could produce greater variations in internal mass for something, that could cook more combinations of elements through more generations of stars. Is that possible? I don't know. I mean, it seems like not, but the idea makes sense, right?
We can't exclude the possibility.
We can't exclude the possibility that there isn't another alternative, right?
Right.
In other words, when we can't exclude the possibility that there's some, either the black hole or just massive old stars, right, that have gone, or what happened. Our star is what, a fourth generation star or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
Right. So maybe at the 10th generation of stars, really large star, it's cooking some set of new elements that are even more complex. It's unlikely, but that's right. So yes, so when you start out with the question, is this evolutionary computation? The answer is yes. What do we mean by evolutionary computation? We mean that the universe uses recombinations to accumulate energy at different levels of complexity. At every level of complexity, there emerges a new set of operations, right? Possible. In other words, new combinations become possible at new scales. I mean, realistically, a protein is an incredibly complicated thing, right? I mean, the long strands of chemicals that basically do work. I mean, they're literally machines,
right? They do stuff.
They do stuff. That's why, it's like we are so much better in our world now that we have machines. But the protein is the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution for life.
Molecules, yeah.
Molecules, right?
Right.
So yeah, but if I say that, that's like going forward. But in order to get the concept across, why? Or in other words, why is it evolutionary computation? You have to understand this problem of computational reducibility, or what is mathematics capable of, and what are operations capable of. Mathematics is capable of less than operations are capable of. Mm-hmm. Now, so the gold standard is not mathematics, it's operations.
Yeah.
Mathematics
is like this. I went to med school in Missouri, so show me. I don't want to hear about it. I love hanging out with you, Kurt. This is freaking good work.
So let me make two more, complete it. So now that we've got to why, right? We now know that what went wrong is what I bring up all the time, is that when Babbage got to the first computer, he didn't say, hey, by the way, we're doing this wrong.
And in addition, right?
Yes.
Oops.
And so
not to rail on Mr. Babbage.
It's not his fault. He was English.
He did his best. He did his best. Okay, sorry to interrupt you again.
It's a very English thing. I can just see that.
I appreciate it.
And so this reversal of the primacy of mathematics to the reversal of operationalism, from idealism, averages and analogies in mathematics, which we falsely consider the gold standard.
Thank you.
Changing from that to operations. Well, why can we do that? Because we actually have enough knowledge now to express the world as operations, whereas we didn't have before. And so now we have enough knowledge about the world to understand it as basically electromagnetic, polarization and energy accumulation. It's just fucking, it's so stupidly simple. It's ridiculous. It really is. It's annoying that we spent thousands of years trying to figure out. No, it turns out it's really simple.
Oh my, Kurt, such a wonderful joy to sit with you and enjoy a moment of your delightful conversation, sir. It is. I want to reflect upon calculus for this. Is integrals, okay? It's like there's a book of all the soluble integrals, right? Integrations that are possible, and there's just a limited number of them because these are the ones we can solve. All the rest are just nonsense. Right. That can't be solved.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I figured that. I was like in high school, and I'm like, why the fuck are we doing this math thing when I can write a program? Right. I mean, I really, that's like where my mind has been, right? Is like, I don't understand why we're doing this math stuff when the program's how you solve it. Right. I mean, and so, and when people say programming is just math, I'm like, only if you're doing it wrong.
That's rude. I like that. Yeah, I'm gonna address you as the remarkably rude Kurt Doolittle for a while.
When you said that a few minutes ago, I'm like, so what's the difference between, like, I always think of like, I'm at this one end, and then there's Peter Zeihan, and then there's like the more formal guys, and then there's like professors, and so you have this spectrum of people with amount of pretense.
Okay.
Right. And I just don't have any.
No pretense.
To me,
it's only just straight Kurt.
I don't find it like I'm imparting this wisdom. To me, I look at it as we're just a bunch of ass clowns, and I can't believe we got here. And it's a big joke to me.
Oh my.
So, it's just the opposite of like, no, it's not really that complicated. We don't, everything's really
simple.
It's that simple.
Wait, I looked this word up in Hebrew yesterday. Ass clown.
You looked up ass
clown. I said, what does it mean in Hebrew? I'm going to share it with you because it's funny, okay?
Yes, you would do that. Why does it not surprise me that you did that?
It's because you keep me around because I'm a parallel processor. It's just all it is. It's like, I'm going to run some parallel processes on this operation and see what we come up with, because it is ass clownery. It is funny. So it is. Ass clown is the nearest I come up with. This is my best analog in Hebrew, is all of them, everyone, a fire under everyone.
I see.
And it's just, that's what it runs the whole show, man. Right? It's what runs the whole show. It's just ass clownery. It's no big deal.
No, I think I was in my college, you could take fiction writing as many times as you wanted.
Oh, right.
So I basically took it every semester.
That's cool, man.
Well, I mean, it was really, I mean.
Tell me why you told me that. I'm interested why you told me that.
How did I get that?
It's like the ass clownery, man. Come on. I want the audience to be aware. The reason I'm around is because I keep Kurt on track. It's just,
I think you throw me off track.
You think that, and you're incorrect, sir. Ask clownery, man. Why did you tell me? Why are we doing this? What
were we just talking about?
Why we're talking about ask clownery, and how come you were taking English fictional writing every semester, That's very interesting to me.
I was trying to tie that back to whatever. What are we talking about?
We were
before
talking
then?
about Zihan and we're going back to the reversal of idealism, analogism.
There was a point there.
Okay. Well, the audience is left.
I figured out my problem yesterday, by the way.
What's that?
I had only decaf coffee left.
Jesus.
And by 3 o'clock, I had a splitting headache. So I went out and got Italian coffee today, which is good and hearty.
Attaboy. I'm very pleased to be here again. We're going to do some work today, are we?
Yeah, but you're not letting, you put me on an arc that was really profoundly important.
Okay, we're talking about evolution.
It's evolutionary computation.
Yes, sir.
So I tried to take it both directions. You can see the world very simply as evolutionary computation.
Okay.
Right? But the why is important, is what's expressible operationally, right? Computation is operational. It's real. It's science.
Yes.
It's not philosophy. It's not mathematics, right? Which is an average statistics. It's existential, causal. One of the things people will tell you when you study mathematics is, well, it's not causal, because the same thing can be expressed. It doesn't matter how you organize the grammar, it's going to be the same, right?
So operational is causal
and
scientific.
Right. And mathematics is analogistic, ideal, and statistical. And so it's just less precise.
Not real.
It's not real, right? I mean, it's a language for expressing the results of real.
Fictionalism.
Correct.
Why you were taking fiction writing in some fashion, I think.
Could be, God knows. It was a reason for it.
I apologize.
Obviously the coffee isn't strong enough. Anyway, so Jesus, you did it again.
No, I did not. It wasn't me.
So then we go from operational and real, right?
Yes, sir.
And we go, and the reason is because what's computable? What's computable is what's actionable. And right, and so what's actionable is larger than what's computational, what's mathematically reducible. In other words, what's right, it makes perfect sense, right? And so
computable is operational, and it exceeds the limits of mathematics.
Correct.
Okay.
Because you can't predict the permutations that come out of it.
That's it.
Right. And so there's a thing there was a mathematics called combinatorics.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it. Combinatorics.
Right? And it was sort of on the wrong track, so it fell off. Because it wasn't binding itself with the real. This is my problem with math in general. And so which Michael and I share this frustration deeply. So, you get off in this situation where you have this what can be, it's just unpredictable, right? So the universe isn't predictable. Now, conversely, let's go back and say, let's answer the hard question. Why is the universe work this way? People say the universe is fine-tuned for life. No, that's kind of stupid. That's like a profoundly stupid idea. No. There's going to
wait. Allow me to collect myself before you continue, because it's too ridiculous of a statement. It was.
It's like
that was even rude for you, Kurt.
How stupid can you be?
Jeez.
And so I'm like, no. And Wolfram did this, right? He's done.
What did he do? What did he do?
Is that the universe will evolve a set of combinations that will allow, any system that is under pressure will evolve some number of combinations.
Right.
Now the question is, what's so funny? So it's just like stupid. I mean, I can't, it's like, if you understand what we know about the physical world today,
Yes,
you
sir.
should comprehend that since everything is possible, the only thing that survives is what's possible. So if we were in a different universe under different pressures, different things would survive in different combinations, producing the same fucking result. It wouldn't be exactly the same, but it would be the same. Now,
the Red Queen continues to do her job.
and so this is why I get this knowledge is why I'm frustrated with the academy, because in my view, they're still living in the 19th century. They don't know it.
Well, it's like there's a reason they don't know it. You know why? They're getting paid to not know it. And it's okay. It's what we call luxuriant ignorance.
Yeah. Even somebody like Dan Dennett, who I don't think is an idiot.
Yes.
I just want to have a debate with him because I don't think he gets it.
Who's the name?
Daniel Dennett. Probably one of our best.
Who is he?
He's a philosopher in California.
All right.
Look him up, Daniel Dennett. He has a
Dennett. Bennett.
He has a massive beard and belly.
Is it Bennett or Dennett?
Dennett with a D.
Yes, sir.
Like dent in your head.
That was rude. Remarkably so.
You don't have any dents.
I do. I actually do. And I will tell you, I will share them with you, okay? Here they are. The dents in my head. Did you see them?
No, I don't really. Oh, I see.
I
Hardly anything.
I did. I want you to know this. When I was in...
You've never met any Russians.
When I was 7, I did this back dive into the pool that we had in our backyard in 1969. And 1970, excuse me. And then I said, hey, Mom, watch this. And did the same thing again and missed the pool, unfortunately.
So that explains it. Mom didn't drop you on your head. You dropped yourself on your head. It's all your fault.
Yes, sir. It was me. I did it for my mom. I was rude, utterly awful. I think I'm overcoming this problem at this time now. After 52 years, I think I'm now getting over it. It's okay. What? It takes working with you to get here.
So anyway, so you started out with so I would say yes. The second point is that computation has only so many directions available to it. Right. So let's say, so of course it can only accumulate energy, retain energy, lose energy, right? That's what it's got.
Right.
All right. I mean, it's just
plus, minus, or equal.
Yes, and that's really
how dull.
So as you go through so what you do is you look at the points in the evolution of life, right? When you talk about humans, you look at the points in the universe where novel combinations are possible. And we call those different disciplines, right? We call that subatomic physics, atomic physics, chemistry, right? And biochemistry and biology, etc. So and so what we're doing there is just like there's no difference between that distinction and arithmetic, fractions,
trigonometry, geometry,
all the way up, right? So there's no difference, is that those are increasing, those mathematics, every time we take mathematics, we're adding additional dimensions of computability, right? Permutation. Well, it's the same thing in disciplines. Every discipline has talking about what operations are available. In other words, what state changes are available.
Is the scope of operations is that it's limited to a scope of operations
at this scale.
That's it.
Right. And so what the reason, so that's just like mathematics, is just a difference of operations, a scale of complexity. right? And so these are both languages, like mathematics is a language, right? Chemistry is a language, biochemistry is a language, biology is a language.
I want to clarify this a little bit. It's an operational language. It's a language of operations.
Right. They're all all technically it's all within a language, and I call each one a grammar, because as a grammar, the definition of a grammar is rules of continuous recursive disambiguation for within a paradigm.
Oh, I have to do this.
All right.
That was for me, because I'm going to write that one down, because that was a good.
Okay. So now you scale. So basically all language does the same thing. What's the least false language? Any language that describes the actual operations that cause state changes at any given scale.
Right.
Now, that's it. So now once you get to life, what is the primary axis of evolutionary computation? Well, the first one is survival.
Where are the girls?
What?
Where are the girls?
I was getting there. I got.
I know. I'm sorry, I didn't hold my water well.
And then you get to sex. Like what? And so for humans, that's just like there's just the positive and negative. There's just like there's egg and sperm. I don't mean this as analogy. I mean this is of absolutely positively physical necessity. There's a reason there are no more than 2 dimensions of evolutionary computation at every scale, because there's no way for nature to remember anything except that.
It's too complex. That won't work.
Right. Once you
get the red, bring the red queen, please.
Yes. And so I always, well, even that is that you'd have to even.
Oh my!
It's like I keep telling people, there's reason 3 dimensions to the universe, 3 spatial dimensions, right?
Okay.
Because there's nowhere else to store information other than a difference plus an option, a retention, right? There's just no way to store information other than 3 dimensions, because you'd have to have. You could say I could take this 3-dimensional thing and this 3-dimensional thing, and I can make a hierarchy which might look like more dimensions, which is when they say 11 dimensions or whatever. This is all fucking nonsense, right? It's just like you might take that many dimensions of measurements to describe it, but the universe has 3 dimensions, spatial dimensions. But why? Because it can't be any more than that. Because how do you remember anything if the only thing you can start with is a difference?
Right.
There's just no way to store the information about relative. Right, you have to get all the way to genetics to be able to do that.
Right.
And so when you look at humans, you realize the same thing. There's a male and a female bias to the universe. What is the way they're dividing it? Well, the universe is divided. We divide the universe by time, and women take the short term and men take the longer term, right? Shorter and fewer and longer and more, or it's a temporal division.
Frequency function. It's a frequency function.
Right. It's just a division. Well, frequencies, division of frequency time. Right? So the only thing that's stable relation is whatever we identify as a trade, because we're able to calculate opportunities and the universe isn't. Hydrogen and oxygen don't get to refuse having sex with each other to create water. It just doesn't happen. Right. And so, but we can say, I don't, you're not hot enough for me. Well, that's usually what they say to me, but I mean, so that's the only difference that's available to us. Now, within that difference, everything just follows rules beneath it. So when you say everything's evolutionary computation, yes, but I want to explain the cause why it's evolutionary computation, because evolution would only result in other words, any universe would always result in producing some sort of evolutionary computation, right? And all universes would. The only thing we need to find out is if this is the only kind that can emerge, or if there are other kinds that use different combinations. But anyway, the result will be the same, right? There's going to be some set of combinations that work,
right?
So then you get up to, we keep combining things, right? And the only thing is what's persistence, because that's what the evolution is solving for. And it just solves for persistence, which is accumulation of energy and storage of it over time. Well, you get to the sexes and that's it. And so once you have the sexes, you realize there's only three means of coercion: seduction, force, and trade, right? Or exchange, bribery, or whatever. There's only three means of coercion. Okay, that's all there is. Everything else we talk about here, like group strategies and whatever, they're just environmental weights on those two factors. The three means of coercion, the sex differences, the need to cooperate, and the three means of coercion, influence or whatever, influence to do it. And then most of what we do, all the complexity we see in life, is all the kind of bullshit lying and posturing we do in order to negotiate cooperation. So this, I hate
mathiness.
Yeah, I don't. It's like I don't like to bring up Wittgenstein or ever give him any credit, but his term language game is actually really good. I mean, I don't even.
That was what we call begrudged acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. I don't want to go off on Wittgenstein. Sorry.
No. But language, he said language. What did he call it? Language games?
Language games. It's all language games. Well, that's a nice way of saying that we're all gaming each other for opportunities. Yeah, I want. All right, I want to win my game, my checkers game with you, and everybody else, and so I'm gonna negotiate all this stuff to try to win my checkers game. But that's all that's going on. And so when we started out this thing, and you say I make you laugh, or you think it's because the irony of this, the difference between the simplicity of what's really going on and the vast ocean of bullshit that we've invented over the past 10,000 years just absolutely floors me, right? I mean, it's just, we're inventive. We're more inventive in bullshit than we are in anything useful. It's hysterical.
It's funny. I talked to my sister about this. I talked to these guys, and I'm talking to the philosophers, and I'm like, so many words. And that's what it comes down to. Just
and the postmodernists, I mean, they're the masters of it. A lot of words that mean nothing.
Literally, don't listen to them. They're poison. No, there's a name for this, and I don't know if you know the word. No, I want to. This is the last diversion I will make before I allow you to continue on your work.
Oh, I don't believe a word of it.
Oh my! It goes like this. There's a word for this in biology, like the signal put out by the animal that's poisonous by advertising his presence. Like, yeah, you don't want to bite me because I am poison.
Yes, it's like the rockfish.
Yeah, it's like this, just like, okay. And I see this among the extreme leftist crazies, right? Just like this kid who shot up the place in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just look at him and you're like, oh my God, that's poison, right?
He's visibly de facto. Well, I mean, we know this because if you take pictures of conservative activists and conservative and left-wing activists, you can tell by looking at them. If you look at conservative talk show hosts versus liberal talk shows, if you look at conservative women versus liberal women, you can tell by looking at them.
There you go. All right. That's a lot. That was momentarily the last diversion I will make you before I allow you to continue on your work, sir.
So this turned out to be a very interesting kickoff to our conversation.
I enjoyed it.
So why did you bring up, is this reducible to evolutionary computation?
Oh, no,
what were you thinking that made you?
I brought it up because I was listening to some of our earlier works and I saw this evolutionary computation. I'm like, it's all it is. It's just evolutionary computation. And it's like, this one is so profoundly basic and keystone foundation to the whole operation that we're conducting here to understand it. So I said it would be useful to have Kurt just work it, say what he thinks about it for a minute.
Well, speaking of using too many words, because I've been accused of that, justifiably, is that it takes quite a bit of work to reduce something like that narrative I just got down to that, right? It's a lot of work to do that.
It is.
And so, you know, what I think the audience probably, oh, you look great with a hat.
I'm tipping my hat to you again.
Is that what the audience, I hope the audience appreciates what I appreciate, is how hard it is, how useful interpersonal discourse like this is in that act of reduction.
Yes.
It's because otherwise, I mean, for me, if I write without doing this, or write without writing to others, I write to myself, right? Because I'm the audience. And you're not gonna, not you, like y'all aren't gonna have, y'all aren't gonna know what the fuck I do little song.
It doesn't mean anything. That will be, yep, it's true.
So it's the whole act of saying, okay, how am I going to teach this, right? That makes it simple. And you help me do this. So that brings us to today's.
Oh, here we go, kids.
Today's topic.
Strap on your seatbelts.
Well,
could be a bumpy ride. I don't know. We're going to talk about lying again.
Yes, we are. And how
about that? Hang on.
And so I'm going to blame you for something. It's not your responsibility, which is one of my favorite activities.
I'm here to take all the blame. I don't care.
I know. That's why it's so charming. It's because it doesn't work, and that's part of the beauty of it. So we've gone through a series of, you've dragged me kicking and screaming.
I'm in the process of civilizing you, sir. It's okay. You're rather barbaric, but charmingly so, right? It's okay. Don't be frightened of Kurt. He's okay.
So you've dragged me through a bunch of changes that involve changing my original prosecution into education. Right, that's what you have been. And you, just in case the audience doesn't know this is his plan. He knows what he's doing. It's just like, he's like, Doolittle is like a rock, and Brad is like water. And it's just like, he's got the patience to wear me down.
It's okay, man. Kurt, you're a genius, man. I love you, and I want you to know this. It's the value of what you're bringing to the public is immense, and it's unavoidable, necessary work to cause you to refine it.
I'd like it to be avoidable. I'd like 6 really hot chicks, like some 4 or 5 really good
wait,
friends.
Gary's on the beach, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I understand you. You make total sense to me. It's like, okay, but in the meantime,
I haven't one of the great things about Eastern Europe before all this chaos was how cheap it was. So you could take like 10 guys, because I've done it. Take like 10 guys and spend like a long weekend in like Odessa, and it's like $1,500, right? I mean, it's nothing, right? Wow. And that involves like, our goal is to make bars run out of Jack Daniels.
Run them out,
and we
man.
did.
Just drain them.
We did.
Wow.
Although I do have a video of Max dropping one of the last bottles on the pavement, and it was like 7 in the morning when we were heading home, great in the morning, and somebody needed to have eggs because they just couldn't handle the alcohol. And somehow the last bottle, which we bought because it was their last one, because you can do that there, or you can do a lot of things when you can bribe people. It's amazing. I believe in bribery. I've been converted. I'm converted to paying for the privilege of.
It's very straight. It's very straight exchange.
It's
right?
a very straight thing, and if it's really bad, they won't do it. But if it's just, this is
not bad enough to not do it.
It's not bad enough to not do it. I'm gonna. So anyway, yeah, we were shutting down. So there's not a lot more fun than that, especially in a place where it's okay for men and women to interact. Like, there's no expectation you're trying to get laid. Right, you're just drinking together and telling stories, and it's it's just socializing. Although I can't say that public. I can't. It's not about me. I didn't do anything.
It remains.
But there were guys there.
Those guys.
Well, there's like, we're trying to make it to the airport, and he won't finish.
Come on now, you've got business to attend to, sir.
Anyway,
All right.
so that's what I'd prefer to be doing, really. And I miss my Ferrari. That's the only thing I miss about at all.
I understand.
Now let's go back to.
Until then, we will continue to do our duty to the general public.
So let's go back on track now.
Yes, sir. You're the
I've had
host.
enough coffee. It seemed to be able to do that.
Yes, sir.
So Brad and I have been through his bunch of stories. First, he's trying to get me to not be angry, which just sort of worked.
I hope so.
Then he got me to reorganize the story from the bottom up, which was incredibly profound, right? I'm missing one. Then he has tried to get me so that I tell the story with less blame. And I think he's got me there too. I don't want to give up. I'm gonna pretend I'm holding out on that one. And the things I had to solve on my own, they were like the truth, reciprocity, the grammars, three means of coercion, all triangular stuff, whatever. And so when I spent on the grammars, though, I developed it one way. And Brad and I are trying to talk here. How do we get rid of this blame? I don't want to come off as like women are shit, right? And
no,
right. I'm trying to say people just lie, right? I mean that's and right now
when it suits their interests,
right? And it's amazing the complex richness of lying. I mean, you a great example is how there's only so many. What's so funny?
It's like the immense capacity of the human mind to compute falsehoods to
absolutely
each other. That's like
it's amazing. So it's like here's a great example of like there's really just one plot, which is change in state, right? It's the anonymous, right? The change. It's basically changing in state, right? And so if you like study different theorists, what you'll end up with at the end is Vonnegut, as because his dissertation was on how many kinds of stories you could tell, right? And he's like, basically there's 30 plots, right? And so I've included that logic in the grammars. Right? So one of the reasons I want to have it there is because it's actually limited.
Yes.
And if you'll notice, it's quite hard to come up with new plots. In other words, it's hard to satisfy the demand for novelty in the production of movies and books and stuff like that.
Right.
What we tend to do is minor variations and what's happening now is you're going from the short story to the novel to the series of novels, which have 100 characters and 60 story arcs and whatever, because that's the only thing you can do. Or there's only complexity because there's no everything else. We already know every other variation. All right. So like, well, if that's true, what in other words, that's a reducible set of operations. Okay? But when you're talking about lying, there's like it's like you fucking infinite, right? I mean, the number of combinations you can lie with is phenomenal.
Well, because it's literally infinite.
Now, so what I've done though is at least for the feminine, the cognitively feminine, the seductive method, is I've reduced that to its total frick.
Right.
I haven't done because I wasn't thinking until we said let's do them in parallel. Let's do the two sexes parallel. That way we get rid of blame. Right? We show that we're all doing it. Like last week we talked about female faith healing versus male mansplaining, which I thought was a perfect illustration that we're all familiar with, right? Men mansplaining to women about a thing that involves social relations and makes no fucking sense, right? All right, and women emoting about a political situation where it makes equally no fucking sense, right? I mean, and so it's just like so obvious that one's like the same, but what I have done is I've reduced the female to the one long narrative, and I haven't reduced the male to that narrative. I have to get there. Now, so think of it that way, as there's this branch at the top, and the end result is this recipe for how males and females quote lie.
Right.
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 Now, I've actually got most.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna it's interesting because I was reflecting upon this as you were speaking. Lie is the operational mechanism to cause the change in state in another human being.
Correct. That is
not based on reality.
Well,
that
is divergent from reciprocity, which includes truth, which consists of consistency, correspondence, parsimony, whatever. So it's a variation from the truth.
Yes, I understand. So it causes an irreciprocal change in state.
Correct.
Another human being. Okay.
Damn, you're getting fucking good at this. Really.
I'm just hanging with you, brother. I just try to do
it's
my company.
Fucking amazing. Because to me, I think this shit's hard. And
it's very complex. It's like, it's really simple though.
It's really simple. The problem is unlearning.
That's right, because you've been diverted by so many competing pathways of thought.
Yes.
And it's like you just have to squelch them down.
Yes.
That's all.
And so the work is that you've got to you have to relearn. Right.
But I'm going to point at Mr. Nietzsche right now and say we have to reevaluate all the values.
Yeah.
That's all.
And so like I'm like autistically wired to do this, right? So it's different for me. But the fact that anybody else can do it, right? I mean, and there's a difference. Like you're really getting there, right? I mean, I noticed it over the past 3 weeks, especially. Martin has got his thing, which is really pretty good, but it's more political than epistemological. Whereas you've got the epistemology, you're getting the epistemology down. And I actually think that's the hard part. Right. And whereas as Luke, he's working on the sociology and the psychology. So we're all sort of, and Brandon, of course, he just works on the policies, political, right? So, I mean, I don't want to bring in Steve Pender and the other guys because they're not as, I mean, we have guys who are basically full-time, well, at least part-time devoted to the Institute, right? You, me, we've devoted a significant amount of time to it. We have others out there. We have a couple of new ones that'll come up now. But we all sort of get things. And what's always amazing to me is that I just was really skeptical anyone would get the epistemology.
I understand.
And you're there. You clearly do.
World. It's a lonely world at the top of the mountain. Right.
Well, I was just skeptical because I actually think it's quite hard.
It's interesting, the difficulty in ignoring the distraction of the nonsense that has been put before you your entire life.
Yes.
That's all it is. And then looking at the North Star and being guided by it. That's all it is.
And when you do that, it turns out everything's really fucking simple. Right? The question is, can we turn that really fucking simple, which in my world is grains of sand, can we turn it into a forest and trees? Right? So that people can understand the story, right, without having to understand all the grains of sand, right? And so we're doing it. So this brings us to my challenge, which I'm trying to present you. I want to present you with the problem I'm having so you can help me solve the problem.
Yes, sir.
Right? Is that we went from me saying, here's the deflationary grammars, here's the normal grammars, here's the inflationary grammars, to here's the grammars of deceit.
Yes.
Right. And I said, well, That's interesting, because I just justified the fictionalisms as if they weren't grammars of deceit when I did that. Yet if I go up, does that make sense?
I understand you.
And so what we did is we made a triangle again, which is the grammars of the deflation, the ordinary grammars, right? The deflationary grammars, the fictionalisms, males, and the solipsisms, or whatever you want to call them, the underminings,
Yeah.
the females. And we've separated these three into the triangle again. And the reason we said we wanted to do that, which is last week or the week before, I don't remember, is because that eliminated the blame against the females, but it also illustrated that the males were lying too. So that's what I liked about it, right?
Only when they get a chance, right?
Right.
What?
And so it's just,
Go ahead.
it's just, go ahead.
I said it's just so cheap to do that. It saves so much effort.
It saves a lot of energy because you don't have to prevaricate, you defend yourself against an argument that just because you want to teach things in sequence.
Right.
Right. Now, so if we look at the fictionalisms, we don't, right, the ways men create systems of deception and women create social constructions of deception. What?
Okay. It's like the men create social systems of deception, which is a social construction.
No, because I don't want to, I want to keep that term, that disambiguation. All right. So I want to make social, I don't know how to separate that term out, but social construction specifically refers to, when I want to maintain it, refer to the use of the emotional versus in other words, you're convincing people to rally emotionally.
I know, but systemically generating this is Soviet system. Generating a system for the purpose of doing this, to systemically enforce it for the whole group.
Well, no,
The beta plan, the beta
I don't think so. There's
Okay.
no way to coerce the whole group under systematizing. There's only an argument put forth in the market, and the argument either survives or fails. With social construction, it's just get on board, and they get on board because social construction is an opportunity for them. This is the problem we discussed yesterday, which is why the female spectrum goes down to a point and the male spectrum is maintained. And so we're in columns and they're in rows. We discussed this yesterday. And so I'm trying to say social construction is a term that was invented by the left to describe what they were doing. And I don't want to try, I want to keep that term.
Okay.
For that purpose.
But it's a system. It's not systematic.
It's not systematic. That's why I want to keep socially constructed and systematized as difference between empathizing and sympathizing. And I'm trying to maintain that disambiguation. Just like we have this problem with, we went over ratio, rationalization. We did this yesterday or whenever. So I don't want to get,
Sorry, sorry. I'm gonna. Okay.
So social construction has to be done, but through reality by chanting, and systematizing has to be done by our. There's a reason why I named my company Reality by Chanting, was to ridicule, because I thought it was to ridicule the opposition.
You're taunting them, are you?
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, reality by chanting. Okay, so the beta males do that.
Sure. So anyway, so again, let me go back and illustrate this. So
Yes,
the deflationary grammars, the systemic grammars, and the socially constructed grammars, right? The male and female and the neutral, right? The grammars of calculation and the grammars of persuasion, right?
Wait, whoa, calculation and persuasion.
Calculation is deflationary.
Okay, yeah, it's operational.
In inflation, conflation, etc., is both directions. Now the difference is whether it's going to be systematizing or empathizing. The other is going to be through argument or social construction. That's the right way to put it. It's argument versus social construction.
I see. That's good. I like that.
All right. So we put out arguments into a market, and they publish social constructions to a market. And the difference we always going to have is that they turn into a class hierarchy that all follows the same argument, and we maintain columnar biases depending upon our spectrum of. Well,
I was focusing my attention on this. It's rightly called fascism.
okay. Well, I mean, communism and fascism are two extremes, right? I mean,
well, it's like interestingly organized in the human body is described as being organized as in fascia, which is like bundles all gathered together that work together. And it's like the function is they don't tolerate the diversity is the issue. The lefties don't tolerate the diversity.
They don't want diversity of opinion,
which is fascinating to me. It's just utterly fascinating. But
because diversity of opinion means you need a means of resolution of conflict, and they avoid all conflict.
Oh, so is that what it is? It's conflict avoidance versus conflict enjoyment.
Well, no, because we find joy in creating the hierarchy, right? And
right, we're finding your proper location in the hierarchy.
Yeah, I just want to know where I am. It's like I would say it's like everybody thinks they want to be in charge until they are. And you realize the responsibility sucks dick. And so, right, it does. And so the thing is that the only reason you want to be in charge is everybody's even worse than you are. And that's actually the guy you want in charge. You want the guy in charge that doesn't want to be there. He's just doing it because everybody's even worse than he is. Right. And so, but the left isn't like that. They don't want to form a hierarchy because they don't want to resolve conflict, and they want to avoid responsibility. So when I say everything the female mind does is evasion of responsibility, and the reason they evade conflict is to evade responsibility. That's all that's going on. There's nothing else going on. It's exasperating, right? That's all that they're doing. Evading responsibility and evading conflict for the purpose of evading responsibility in order so they can everybody can maximize their internal consumption at the lowest risk. That's all they do. They're just fucking bots. It's terrifying to me, right? I mean, if I can blame the right for being bots, the male for being bots, but at least it's a useful bot.
Oh my.
This is what I mean when it's the irony. It's like God is having a fucking blast right now, looking down and saying, "You bunch of ass clowns, the amount of shit you come up with, I can't fucking believe it." And he just chuckles. He has a chuckle about the dumb shit we do. And then guys like us come along every couple of thousand years and actually tip the scales one direction, goes, somebody fucking got it. That's awesome.
Right?
He's got to be a comedian. I mean, he's got to like the chuckles. I mean, it's either that or he's just fucking ruthless as hell. It's like, I'm trying. The way I look at it, at this is I anthropomorphize God this way. It's like, look, I've got no hands. I've only got this me, right? I need to grow some hands that can actually physically manipulate the universe. You guys get the fucking job of growing my hands. All right. And so, I'm just waiting for you to grow my hands. Now, will you hurry the fuck up, please? Right. And the harder it is on you, the more incentive you seem to have. So I'm going to.
Right.
So we're supposed to evolve into the hands of God. So that's fine. Anyway, so that's how did I get over there? I was trying to just make a quick aside.
They're avoiding conflict and evading responsibility.
Once you reduce all female behavior to that, you realize that their attempt at care, all their pretense of goodness, It's just defense mechanism.
Defensive, okay. Okay.
They're creating safety. Men try to create security. That's different.
Do distinguish that, please.
Safety is a mental,
Like an emotional state.
an emotional state, and security is a physical state.
Okay.
Thank you for asking me to clarify that. I do that all the time, and I just realized I never clarified that because I thought it was obvious.
That's why I'm here, Kurt. Like, I'm here to point
You're
out.
here because I'm an idiot.
Apparently so. I'm not going to argue with you.
No problem making fun of myself for my multiple failings. Anyway, so once you realize that's all they're doing,
Yes.
they're childlike.
Yes.
And so since they want to not be responsible, then we have to, they're making us be responsible.
Yeah.
Basically, everybody who says all they do is shit test is absolutely true. What do children do to parents?
They have to
shit
test.
them.
They have to.
What do women do? They shit test men.
They have to.
Right? That's all that's going on. Why? Because the shit test is all they can do to ensure that they're not responsible, and right, and they're and they can avoid conflict. So they just complain their way into getting us to be responsible so that they don't have to be. Now, you could call it horrible, but it's really not. I mean, mothers need men to do that because children are fragile in space and time, right? More men are not. I mean, in polities certainly aren't. And so if it's not so much the evasion of all responsibility, it's the limiting their responsibility to themselves and their children. Right. So they don't, even for themselves, that's questionable. It's mostly for the people, the things they care for, their children. And it's purely instinctual. So it makes perfect sense.
Right.
And again, to horrify everybody about the ridiculous simplicity of it, just reduce everything to time, division of labor and time, and that's all the brain has to calculate is short-term emotional versus long-term systemic. And that's it. It's just so, I mean, in other words, all our behavior is an emergent property of division of labor and time.
Right.
So now let's go back to my frame of the question, back to the triangle. Deflationary language up, systemic deceit toward the male at bottom, and socially constructed deceit toward the emotional deceit toward the female axis. Now, okay, well,
I want to make this clear to the audience that the emotional and because the image that we're looking at a mirror image of what you're seeing, Kurt, when you make these directions. The emotional female is to the left.
Yes. Yeah, so what direction is
that looks to that's the right of the screen.
Oh, I see. So I see, when I see me, I see this is the left. I see a mirror. I don't see a
mirror image. You're seeing a mirror.
I see a mirror image. Okay.
I have to say that. I apologize for interrupting you again, sir.
I wonder if I should change that just for that reason. So triangle, left, female, right, male, libertarian top, which is basically the operationally. Right. And if you turn it this way, you get the women over here at a point and the men along a spectrum of the vertical line from the authoritarian to libertarian and everything in the middle. All right. So now back to the problem. Back to the problem is I had to do a lot of work to revise the story to talk the bottom up instead of from the grammars out. That was a lot of work.
Sorry. Wait, I'm gonna tip my hat.
Brad says, I'm sorry. He says, I'm sorry, but he says, I'm sorry the way Daddy says to you, I'm sorry you had to go to 4 years of college to earn a degree.
It's just a bitch. It's like
it's just what it, I'm I empathize with you, but I'm not sorry.
Not at all. Not at all. It's just such a bitch, man. So much work.
Well, so, but the logic of truth, truth, reciprocity, demonstrated interest, and the grammars,
Yes.
right? Truth, reciprocity, trifunctionalism in the grammars, right? That's probably the other way, grammars and trifunctionalism. Those insights, those were things that I didn't have a problem because of this nice linear universal. Makes sense, right? It's a linear universal. But the minute we get down into lying, it turns out to be sex differences in behavior. Yes. And now it's not linear. And so I just feel like it's just way more complicated to tell the story.
It's irrational function, right?
Oh, it's a fucking nightmare. So so the problem I'm having is, what are you laughing at me for?
I don't know. I'm done. We're getting to the problem. What's the problem, Kurt?
The problem is, if I look at this, I don't know how to tell that story.
Too many grains of sand.
It's just, I'm not saying I can't. I'm saying I need help figuring out how to talk about this. Because I spent like, yesterday and sometime yesterday evening, and I've spent this morning, I got up early, believe it or not, just for you, Brad.
You're very kind.
Just so I could be prepared, because I was so unprepared and lacking caffeine yesterday. I really felt terrible yesterday. I was like, I can't think straight.
You did a good job. It was a very good conversation, I thought.
Well, that's you taking the horse out for training under the illusion that the horse knows what it's doing. Anyway.
Please pretend the horse knows what it's doing. It will get better.
So I'm just having trouble with this story, because the truth is that I can tell the female side of that story.
Right.
But I don't know if I can tell the male side yet. Because I haven't it's only been recently I've made that shift of comparing the male and female. And if you look at the illustration we made last weekend, which shows here's the faculties, here's testimony, here's what you right, and here's the methods of sex differences and deceit. You look at that scale. I want to grow that process. I want to grow that, and I don't. Wow.
What?
So only way I can think of doing it, which is baiting the negative. I just figured it out, maybe, because I knew if I talked to you, I would figure it out.
That's all it is.
Is I want to start with the female and then compare it to the male.
Right.
Because, and I think what I got screwed up is everything in the past I've been doing is starting with the male and comparing the female. And so maybe I just needed to flip my head around. Maybe that's what I just did. But I sort of have to do that. And I think I have to just walk through it with you a couple of times. In other words, this is to apologize to you and the audience. I don't seem to be able to get, like, stuff just happens in my head, but I've had enough stresses and other things, distractions, that I'm just sort of getting my shit back together, so to speak. Right. And so certain things are coming to me when we're working around the house doing stuff or going out.
That's right. That's right.
But I'm not able to fix this one. And I don't know why. And I think I just need to talk it through.
Okay.
Is that all right? So that's a way of saying
we're not expecting a final product today.
Well, it's more that I need you to have low expectations.
But I try to keep my expectations quite low, therefore my disappointment is a minimum.
Well, I'm always amazed at the audience, because like we got one is like, wow, I learned more about this than 4 years of college, right? I mean, you get those, like we got a couple of those this week, right? I mean, and you simplify, like people commented on the staff meeting from Thursday. It's like,
it's a very good meeting.
It's just like, wow. And the thing is that it takes a long time to get something reduced
That's right. It's boiling it down.
Boiling down to its causes, because that's what we're doing, right? We're building logic of first causes. So in order to say, how do I build this up from first causes and explain it in a set of terms that are measurements, right? That people can hold in their heads so that they can see the consistency. So for, the whole, we did concurrent, common, natural law, right, of cooperation. That just to get there. I mean, I've been working on this for how long?
Small thing. It looks small because it's only 4 words.
Yeah, I mean, but there's enough there.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, the minute you add concurrency,
yes,
you explain commonality.
Yeah,
right? And until you've got commonality, you don't understand the point of it, because right, you don't see it. It's actually concurrency, right? At scale, but it's common because it's concurrent, right? And then it's natural because scientific, and it's scientific because it's been empirically discovered. It's been empirically discovered because there's no authority, and given no authority, the only thing we have to do is what's empirical, and what empirically results in the resolution of conflict, which is the elimination, the respect for sovereignty, self-determination by sovereignty, reciprocity, and sovereignty and demonstrated interest, reciprocity, display, word, and deed. So over time, the problem is reducing all of that, all of the law to that sequence. It turns out to be somewhat hard to do that.
It takes a minute. Okay, but we're trying to boil the lies down, and that's harder because they're more irrational.
It really is. I mean, so what I discovered
is a forensic analysis of all the multivariate potentials of the infinite potentials of lies, right? That's
correct. Although I have listed them.
Yes.
I have not paired off the female and the male.
I see.
Because I just looked at it. This is my failure, right? I mistakenly took the male means of lying as a universal. In other words, systematizing as universal. I could flip it around and say everything, all the deflationary grammars right through systematizing are male, and say all the empathic, socially constructed grammars are female. In other words, women don't think in math and reason and logic and whatever, right? We can teach them those things. But we can teach deflationary concepts because they're about the world, they're not about each other. But the minute we start talking about each other, you embrace empathy.
Yes.
Right. And so I could just say that the deflationary grammars are just the right hand of the tilted triangle, and all the means of lying
are all female.
All female. So I'm trying not to do that. But so the problem,
I don't agree. I think that it's like
I know I don't agree. That's the point.
I will point to this. It's like the issue is on the right hand side of the triangle that you have there. And I'm trying to put it over here. Okay, does that look on the right hand side to you?
Yes.
Okay, so it's like this, and then you have the triangle pointed like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this column here represents the potentials of reality as expressed by males.
Yes.
And it's like this. There's the males don't care. They're organized like this along this column in strata.
From authority to reciprocity.
Yes. And it's hierarchical. And it's like, but there's the lying of the men are down here. Because they're like, I'm just because I said so.
Yes.
That's the authoritarian dad. It's just like my dad, right? We're going somewhere, and the kids and the mom they want to go one place, and the dad's like, it's not a democracy. And he continues to drive wherever the hell he wants to. Right? And so it's like it's dictation, right? Dictatorial.
Yes.
And it's like a lie.
Well, no, but so that's a great question then.
It's operationally true.
There's no need to lie anywhere among the male scale. The question is, where does the need to lie come in? That's my problem.
Right? Okay.
right? And so what systematizing is lying,
How is
right? Now,
it? Wait,
excuse me. The three means of systematizing, or four means: denial, sophistry, magic, and occultism, right?
okay.
Those are all appeals to the different senses, right? The different human faculties, to try to overload those faculties, right? You notice among them that those aren't, that the fifth one isn't emotion, right? It isn't fear, it isn't emotion. These are all systematizing. They aren't socially constructed. The fifth one's the female, which is socially constructed.
Is emotionality.
Right. And so you say, how do I try to represent this? And I'm like, okay, well, the easy way to do it, because as we can, what we're going to find out, because I've got this huge list of things, right, is that the difference between male and female is always empathizing versus empathizing in time, systematizing over time, because we're trying to avoid or settle conflict in order to either gain responsibility and agency, or avoid responsibility and retain local agency. So, I mean, that's just the male and female spectrum, right? That's all that's going on. There's nothing else. It's really all reducible to those dimensions. So male systematizing is great, but then we come into male deceits, which are all systemic forms of deception. They're all methods of argumentative deception, but they're not means of socially constructed deception.
Okay.
They're means of false true, not false good.
Whoa, I like that. So the male is false true.
And the female is false
messed
good.
up. Wait, false good.
Say pretense of truth versus pretense of good.
Right.
So that's what the difference is. Again, it's empathizing versus sympathizing. Empathizing versus
systematizing.
I just did it again. Empathizing versus systematizing.
They're like spelled almost the same, and you categorize things by their spelling, I think, or their sounds. So pretend true versus pretend good. I like that. And it's
That's
like,
all.
if you look at the axis of that thing, so you got this with the triangle, the females are over here, and it's like on this axis between the female and the male authoritarian, on that line is the pretend good, pretend true spectrum.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I think it might be from the middle out. I'm not really sure.
That's okay.
Right? It might
Yeah, no, because it's like true is in the middle, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's like as you go down the limbs towards
Right.
the apexes of the triangle, you have pretend true,
And pretend
down here, and then pretend good over here.
Yeah.
Pretend is a good word. I'm going to write that down.
And I think it might be worse.
Oh, do say. I do. Wait, I'm stealing myself for worse from Kurt.
I actually think it's upward pretend true, female pretend good, and I don't fucking care.
Shit, yes. It's like, right, that's my dad. So I tell another.
I think that's the right answer.
I'm telling another story on my dad because
there's no point in having an argument unless you're negotiating. If you're not, if it's forced, you're not negotiating.
Right. So here's my dad. Right? So we're in the Volkswagen bus. We're driving to California probably or something like that. And the kids are misbehaving in the back. And he's I'm sitting right in the middle between the seats, the front seats, right? In the second seat. And the kids are misbehaving in the back, and he's mad, and he reaches out, he just reaches back and strikes me, and I wasn't doing shit. I said, why'd you hit me? He says, you were closest. Doesn't care. You kids in the back, stop it, or I'm gonna hit him again. So
that is so quintessential a male thing, right?
You were close.
It doesn't matter. I gave out the lesson learned.
Shit. I'm like, this is, what world am I living in here, man? It's rough. So, okay, so we go over this triangle again, okay? We got the males that don't care on the right. Don't care. Oh, because this is beautiful because the women do care. They pretend they care.
It's so, once we realize how reducible and simple it is,
Yes.
it's so fucking irritating.
Wait. So the living pretend true, which is it's perfect. You've just done it, man. Because it is pretend true is like I'm deceiving you in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And the Romans are going to come take all your shit. Fuck
And the authoritarian, they just don't give a shit,
no.
which I think is funny. I don't,
Did you write that down? I mean, I drew the picture. I drew this picture right there. Right?
well, I won't forget it, but yeah, I mean,
It's freaking awesome, man. That was for the audience.
so it just,
Wow.
so now we've got to tell, like I said, why do I want to talk to you about this?
Right?
I need to tell this story.
Yeah.
We just created a new way of telling the story, right? The problem is, how do I, when I get down to brass tacks, like I get like, can I
You can share your screen.
go down to, where's this one?
Remarkable conversation, I must say, Kurt.
Oh, stop. What are you doing?
Just stop.
You see the word participants, or do you?
I see sex differences in strategy.
Okay. So this is just like a list of some of the things that I've collected that are sex differences in lying. Actually, sex differences in general.
Right.
Right. And so, but everything is reducible to this, right? That's really
Right.
it. But then I have like this detail, this detail, this detail, this detail. This is the top level, how they escalate. This is the lower level, how
Wow.
they escalate. All right.
Okay.
So there's a lot here.
Okay.
All right. I think I can organize. Three of three.
Okay.
All right. So I think I can organize it. All right. Yet here's the male methods of argument. And here's the evolution of those methods of argument. So I'm like, how the fuck do I tell this story?
I don't understand the question, sir. See, what is the question you're trying to answer?
I don't know how to organize the information into a story. I feel like, see what I wanted to do. I'm going to stop this. See what I wanted to do was I wanted to continue this parallel.
Right.
So you can see my plan.
Okay, so we ignore the don't care.
I think we have to put that out there. And I think don't care is the opposite. I think don't care sort of matters like deflationary matters. Deflationary grammars are true. Don't care grammars are true. Right? And so we have the pretense.
They're no pretend. The don't care aren't pretend.
Right. No, they don't pretend. They don't
But
have to.
that's right. So it's not negotiated, however.
Right. I mean, just force, just set.
So
I said that violence is the truest form of communication.
it's unambiguous.
It's completely unambiguous.
Right. Now, so if you look at the triangle that goes between the, and I look at the, I have the female symbol on the left, the male symbol on the right, and the equal sign at the top.
Yes.
Okay. And if you look at the perimeter of the triangle, each of the legs of the triangle, 3 legs, each represents a spectrum that the lies will fall upon.
Yes.
Okay. And so those 3 spectra are to be considered in this discourse.
Yeah, I just think that is there 3 spectra? There's the deflationary versus the I don't care, and there's the systematizing versus the empathizing, socially constructed.
But the only interesting parts are that there's the don't care to pretend true, right? Or yeah.
In other words, we don't have to discuss them. Is what you're.
It's not necessary to discuss that which is not negotiable.
Right. So we just have to discuss the 2.
But it's like the spectrum of pretend care to don't care, and then pretend care to pretend true.
Yes.
Two distinctions of variations of lying, which is as pretend care of females tends to become systematized as it approaches the male side.
Correct.
And so the systematization of it, the language changes.
Well, that's the argument, right? The argument is that the Abrahamic religions in version theological 1, and now in version 1 is the female group strategy. The second is the Abrahamic religion is V2, and Marxism, postmodern, neo-Marxism, etc., are V3. And so, I mean, you're the one who pointed this out, is that they combine systematizing with empathizing. And so the thing is, they did such a good job of it by overloading, right? That it sounds systemic, right? But so does a lot of philosophy, right?
So it is. So, but I say that that goes on the spectrum of pretend care to pretend true.
Yes.
Right.
So that's sort of like the axis between the libertarian equal and the
yes
and the
feminine. Yes.
So the man one is really easy, and so that you have the
fascism
along the bottom one. Yeah. Okay. I got it.
Does that work?
Yeah, that works. I was the reason I'm questioning is I want to make sure I'm not fitting. In other words, I don't want to try to fit the triangle. It's okay if you discover by disambiguation that there's a triangular relationship, but I'm trying to make sure I'm not fitting the triangle. And I don't think we're fitting. In other words, I don't want to try to make something fit into the triangle. It isn't obviously a triangular relationship. And so I don't think it's fitting. I think it's correct. So in any event, so what I think I want so fun. What's the matter?
It's just a weird thing. It's like it's like it's funny to me because it's like the masculine side is it's don't care part. There's no lying there, man.
No,
it's just what it is.
That you go back to 2009. I think one of the first things I wrote was along these lines was that because when I was working with the first ternary logic of there were 3 options of negotiation, right? Because I'm like, Hop, you're wrong, right? I mean, I knew Hop was wrong with his anyway, and I was like, no, violence is the truest form of negotiation. That's all. It's not false.
Can't be. It's not.
It's not reciprocal, but it's not false.
So that this is interesting. This is good because this triangle that you're looking at is irreciprocity.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay, so that's how we separate it.
That's how you resolve it.
That's how we resolve it, is the
Because
two
it
triangles.
doesn't have to do with false and true. It has to do with reciprocity.
So is that actually with the tetragram, hold on, let me say this. Is that the tetrahedron we've been looking for? We've been intuiting that there's a tetrahedron instead of just a triangle.
Okay.
Is that the difference? Is the difference between reciprocity and irreciprocity? In other words, is that what's going on?
Yes, because we're in the darker half. The lies are in the dark half, which is irreciprocity.
Okay, so male and female, spin it, and reciprocity and irreciprocity.
Well, I talk it ethos and chaos.
Yeah, I can't do that though.
It's ethical, reciprocal, or chaotic and irreciprocal.
Okay, well, that would be correct.
And so that's the tetrahedron. So we're in the bottom half of it. There's a negative tetrahedron. The negotiated points of the triangle. There's a triangle of male, female, and equal, the equilibrium, right? The trade. And then there's a tetrahedron on top and a tetrahedron on the bottom. And the ethical on top and the chaotic on the bottom.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yeah, I have to play with it because that needs a lot of falsification. But I think that's something we should look at. Anyway, what I like about these diagrams is it gets close to my ambition, which is to have a symbol for the concepts.
Yeah.
I'm usually anti-symbolic, which is kind of funny because you're the opposite. I think it's kind of funny, the irony. But one of the things I liked about the Laws of Power book is that he tried to create some visual symbol.
Yes.
To associate with it. And so I like it because it's easier to maintain that visual index.
Yes.
And than it is to remember all the words.
That's right.
So I think we're getting closer and closer to that. The ability to represent everything as geometry. Anyway, I don't want to get lost here. The point I'm trying to say is we want to try to set the stage for this, right? We want to tell a story.
Right.
And I'm just trying to, and so far, if we go down to, where's my share screen? Why does this want to change? Okay. This is my outline. Yeah, I wanted to just go through that, right? But we got to where plan. So that was my first try. Then we had our notes. Second plan was start with the faculties. Yeah. Sex differences in go from faculties to truth to deflationary, right? And then we did it. The faculties to constraints on testimony, to mapping constraints on testimony to grammars. And this starts to get, this is our triangle, right? This is the top, and that's the masculines, feminine. I got to reverse the columns, right?
Yes.
And then made some notes here. And then this is where I got to where I was actually, when I was just working on the female, I was working through storytelling. I think we might remember this. Faith, healing, storytelling, false promise, biblical critique of it. Yeah. And then escalating from storytelling to pill pull, and escalating from sophistry to critique, pill pull to critique, to conduct warfare from within. And the greatest structure is delay and deceive. And so this goes earlier, increasing the scale. Here's how that's escalated. So this has to be organized, right? So I can organize the female, but now I've got to bring in the male. I'm worried that the male is so simple.
The male is simple, but it's
No, we have. No, we've got it. We have got it. The female, the male, I don't care. The systematizing, the deflationary, and the synthesis. So we got a peace sign.
okay.
The synthesis is the bottom axis. The synthesis is systematizing and social construction.
This the spectrum between the male and the female.
Right. I mean, the synthesis is the. Oh God, my brain's starting to get. I'm going to make more coffee while I think through this one. There's a relate. How do you get female social construction, male systematizing, and you end up with the Abrahamic religion and the Marxist religion? And I think the problem is there's a male version of saying that, and
There's a male version of saying what?
the same thing. In other words, how our discussion is revolved around that the unification of Greco reason with Middle Eastern mythologization created, there was the unification of the masculine and feminine into a merger of the male systematizing and the female social construction. And so there's how do we
like the equilibrium, right?
merger or equilibrium? It's maybe an equilibrium. Interesting. That's my really smart way of describing it.
Because it's like this. If you look at it, it says that in the construction of Western civilization, you got to go back to the Middle East. So we're going to go back to the Bronze Age when you got all these sky god guys, masculine guys with bronze tools coming and taking over the feminine copper civilization in the Euphrates. That has the beta males that are making the whole thing hold together. They are the social glue. They're the social construction, and they don't care who the alpha male is. A new daddy's coming in some time when the old daddy gets weak.
Well, because that's what they use, though. We call it, I use the general term storytelling to describe the female method of faith healing on up, right? What we call mythization or mythologization, or I mean, mythicisms, right? There's a whole bunch of terms out there floating around between the different scholars, right? But they turned storytelling into myth. And when they did that, they tried to.
I think it started out. I bet it's gone the other way, though. It becomes myth. The stories become mythical.
That's what I said.
Yeah, you did. I did. Okay. I apologize.
Right. So they turned into myth, and myth became a set of rules, right? A way of thinking.
This is how we solve the problem. We solve the problems like that.
And it's especially useful because it's empathic. You don't need a lot of reason to do it. You don't need an education to do it. Right. It's simply anthropomorphic imitation. You can feel it. You don't need to reason it.
That's right. It's always intuitive function.
right? And so, and it works by suggestion
That's right.
and analogy.
That's right.
Which is all it works by suggestion, by suspension of disbelief during a period of storytelling that includes loading and framing, right? I mean, it's a,
Right.
but the thing is, we don't see that as a logic, right? The same way I sort of critical of mathematics as being statistical, right? And philosophy being less so, and mythologizing being less so, right? I mean, these are, but it's still a system of measurement. It's
Yes.
just, right? It's just a measurement relying on empathy, right? Empathy and sympathy. Empathy being emotional, sympathy being
intuitive.
It's very intuitive, and it works by suggestion. You don't have to. I mean, the problem with the things about reason is the more you're dependent on reason, less than intuition and emotion is, the more repetition you have to do in order to internalize it. So one of the great things about storytelling is that because you're already operationalized intuitions, right, emotions, whatever, because it's your standard system of measurement, you don't have to repeat it a whole lot in order to get it. I mean, stories should resonate with you the first time you hear them. Or myths, right? And they do, right? And the more you hear them, the more they resonate with you, the more they become a system of measurement for you. So the question is only whether, I mean, I said this yesterday, the question is only whether you're using behavior mod, which is, you could call it education or training or discipline or whatever you want to call it. When you're modifying behavior, so are you trying to modify behavior to correspond to reality or diverge from it? Are you trying to modify behavior to produce reciprocity or reciprocity?
Right.
So it's not so much that mythology is bad or philosophy is bad or science is bad or pseudoscience is bad. I mean, the point is, because when you get to science, basically you're testifying that it's corresponding, consistent with reality, and it's reciprocal, right? Before you get there, you know, there's all sorts of means of diverging from what's reciprocal and consistent, correspondent with reality. So there's a lot of room for manipulation as you move from science to philosophy, to science to history to philosophy. It's history is the best. Science to history to philosophy to religion, to theology, mythology.
Right.
So there's a more room because there's less constraint, right?
Right.
The more constraint, the more parsimonious, the more constraint, the less room there is for
misinterpretation.
Whereas, however, you have the inverse of cost effect, which is just really easy to use anthropomorphism. It's really easy to use philosophy of reason. It's really easy to use history, and it's really easy to do science. Well, it's easy to use those things if you have a requisite knowledge. But I don't know if you remember what it's like to read history when you're a kid. It's like, I don't know what they're referring to. You don't have enough model.
There's not enough background, right?
Right. And when you first get philosophy, which philosophy are you talking about? Analytic philosophy like I do or the logicians do? Or are you talking about philosophy like wisdom literature that's based on just reason without any appeal to the supernatural? Or are you talking about mythology, which is an analogy that applies to supernatural because there's nothing else you can use to explain phenomenon?
Right.
So the cost of education goes up with the knowledge required to do it. So the only question is, as you go down in simplicity, the room for the deception and irreciprocity or error or bias, but that's okay when you're teaching morals, because morals are universals, right? It's not the same, but when you're teaching sciences, that's something, you know, you're trying to teach measurements, that's something different.
So, okay.
So do you get what I'm sort of hitting at here?
I do.
So the point I want to make is I don't want to demonize mythology and philosophy.
That's correct.
Whatever.
That's right.
What I'm trying to do is separate the fact that these are means of education from the fact that they're also increasingly vulnerable to falsehood and irreciprocity.
I want to pursue this from a perspective that you may have considered and you may not have considered, but I'm interested in looking at it from a human perspective, because it's like one of the things you're doing when you're lying to someone is to, you're gaming their value system. You're overloading their value system so that they falsely believe the value that they're getting is exceeding the cost they're going to pay. Excuse me, going to pay, Grandpa. Right? And that it is the value system of their intuitions which is being gamed. Because it's too much work to discover that I have been lied to.
Correct. It's just, it's what we call overloading, right? You're biasing one set of auto associations instead of another. And the difference is the more intuitionistic our auto associations, the easier they are to bias. The more, does that make sense? The more intuitionistic a set of auto associations, the easier it is to increase their magnitude, right? So it's easier to get someone to pay attention to you when you're telling them something that they
want to hear.
They want to hear.
So the lie is the mechanism of overload.
Correct. The lie is the technique you use to cause overloading.
So it is like,
Excuse me. Let me just get careful here. Loading, framing, let's go, obscuring, loading, framing, overloading. So
okay.
Overloading is what happens when you have given the person a lot of information, so much that they're so confused, they've lost the ability to reason outside of the frame you've given them. So obscuring is not telling people something or telling something different.
That's right.
Loading is changing the value system of it.
Wait. Framing is?
I didn't get framing yet.
I'm sorry. Loading is
Loading is assigning value.
Okay.
Or change in value. And framing is creating a circumstance, describing a circumstance that further biases value. And overloading is doing that so thoroughly that you no longer can. It's basically creating a suspension of disbelief, so you're vulnerable to suggestion. So in other words, propaganda is overloading. Social construction is overloading, right? But you can overload. I mean, you know what the feeling of overloading is. It's like, you're like, I don't know, I've lost track of what's going on here. I'm not sure. But part of overloading is appealing to empathy or emotions to the point which you just empathize with the character being presented in the circumstance, right? You've lost all judgment of the circumstance, of the valuation of the framing. In other words, you've lost the ability to disambiguate and actually judge.
So failure of disambiguation.
Yep.
Of the faculty that allows you to disambiguate.
Correct. Damn, you're good.
Framing is focusing the attention.
It's context. Loading is priority. Framing is context. Obscuring is omitting.
Yes.
Omitting, valuing, context, right? And then overloading is what you're hoping to achieve. One of the reasons storytelling works is that if you begin to, you know what the feeling of suspension is? It's when you go to the movies and you forget that you're watching a movie. You're like, right, that's suspension of disbelief. Or when you're reading a book and you're no longer suspending disbelief that it's a fictional story. You actually feel like you're experiencing it yourself, right? That's technically overload, right? That's suspension of disbelief. Well, the same thing can happen through, if I talk to you enough, right? I mean, it's like what I always tease Eric Weinstein, because he starts on some narrative and it sounds like he's telling you true things, but you realize that it's the whole point is suggestion outside about something that's completely unrelated to what he's talking about. Right. I just find it humorous because I don't even know if he's aware of it. Right.
Right. Right. Now, I will tell you a short story.
I need to understand why you're confused before you tell me.
I'm not confused.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not confused. You're doing a fine job of illustrating the points here. That I went to the movies one time with my then girlfriend, and I specifically made an attempt, and I may not have been with a girlfriend. I made an attempt to not suspend my disbelief and focus my attention on the fact that I'm in a theater watching a movie, as opposed to let myself be drawn into the story. Okay. And it caused me to have such a great headache. I had a terrible headache because it was difficult to not suspend my disbelief, because it was work to maintain my awareness that I'm sitting in a theater with a bunch of people watching a projector movie. But it caused me a headache because it's like that powerful of a tool. So it comes down to the beta males are using female methods to control the don't care males.
Yes.
To create an equilibrium.
That hurt.
It didn't hurt me a bit, buddy boy, because I don't care. It's simple, man. It's that simple. And it's on an axis that is ethical or unethical. The Roman Church was a new equilibrium, organization of the beta males in equilibrium with the alpha males as the monarchy, the aristocrats. It was the new equilibrium of Rome, and it was corrupt and wicked and all that in ways that it was. It was a new equilibrium.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be critical of church at all times, probably, but not of Jesus, but of the church.
No, sir. I said no, sir. I agreed with you.
Yeah. In that the value of Christianity is it allowed people from less advanced civilizations, just like it allowed people from the lower classes to have value, to have social value and merit and membership in the polity, even if they were not strong or powerful or able. In other words, even women could contribute to society. Mm-hmm. So it could allow them to have status, because before that you were either a citizen in aristocracy or you were a slave or whatever.
Yeah.
And so because you were considered to be immoral, right, by the aristocracy. But Christianity actually produced a morality that was compatible with the aristocracy.
That's
right. And this is the problem I have, is that I can't complain about Christianity or Jesus. I can only complain about the church.
The human structure that was on that framework.
Right. Which was, in my view, horrible. But in the sense of, I said this yesterday, is that if, we can say there's only been one Christian, that's Jesus, but at least he created the template for the people who have no power and wealth and resources and family and relations and maybe no ability. You just have to not be bad to be a good Christian. I mean, it's really that simple. Just don't be bad and you're good, right? I mean,
you're good enough. That's good enough.
That's good enough to be, but people don't realize how big a contribution that is to society. Is not being bad. And so the thing that it did for the aristocracy is made people capable of treating others like customers. And so Christianity is very good at preparing you for a majority middle class, high trust society. My problem is that it got wrapped in all this Semitic nonsense, superstition. Jesus was a really amazing character, and he was not that different from
I
what
know, but it's the elaboration of the church was the elaboration by beta males for
agreed.
their own benefit. It's
That's
just
right.
institutionalization of bullshit.
It was the same as the
But
credentialism today.
yes. So the issue is this: see, the beta males they just keep reorganizing to generate a new equilibrium that suits their interests at the moment, and that it's in contest with the alpha male types who don't care.
Yep.
And it's constant the negotiation on the male side of the triangle, right? Between the don't care males and the beta males are up here negotiating it, right? The alpha males don't care; they're just going to do their job.
Yep. And so
the flux is when the social construction that has been agreed to with the females and the merchants, right, doesn't match the reality that these guys are working in. That they care again, and they're going to come out of the mountains and reform the beta males.
Yes.
That's all. It's just a renegotiation again, every 4 generations because of the.
And there you go. That's the fucking problem. That's the problem, is that we coalesce, we pursue an opportunity to the point where the opportunity has been exhausted. Now it's left with a misallocation of resources.
Yes, sir.
And now we have to reorganize to reallocate the resources.
Yes, sir. And it's a mess.
Okay, I need more.
Yes. What do you want to do, Kurt?
I don't want to do anything. We can
just get some coffee. I will cook some too.
As a matter of, are we gonna pause or are we gonna leave it going?
We can stop it. That'll be okay. Just
okay.
Everybody.
The problem is
it's going to look like nothing to you.
Wait. What happens though is that we come back and we say, let's get ready to talk. And then we say something really interesting for 10 minutes and we forget to put in the video. So we got to remember to turn it back on as soon as we get our coffee. I'll even wash my cup because it's getting pretty.
I know. I was going to say the same thing because I did that. And I was like, oh my.
It's getting pretty scary.
Yes, sir. Now I'm pausing.
We're back.
With coffee.
I've cleaned my coffee cup.
Cleaned up.
And it's fresh Italian coffee. Melita, whatever it is.
How lovely. What's the name of it?
I don't know. It's little, there's a lot of Italians around here. So we get a lot of Italian brand things, which is cheaper and better, by the way.
That's why I'm asking. I'm like, okay, maybe I can improve my the grade, the cut, right?
Just anything Italian is going to be stronger. It's whether it's better or not depends on your taste, but
yes, sir. Okay. Now that we're back.
So Brad was saying something a minute ago, which cued me into something that's been processing in the back of my head along these lines, because I'm struggling with this problem, as you can see, since Brad and I are having a lot of fun talking about it, but there's something here. There's a way to represent what we're talking about to make all these things fit.
Right. They go, no, wait, not to make them fit. That describes them.
Describes how they're related to one each other. And I was, it's something I asked somebody earlier, because some woman said a usually stupidly female thing. So I planned that for a good 3 seconds.
That was well done.
I planned that just to see if I could sneak that in and get a reaction out of you.
Oh,
see, it only works if I can surprise, right? It's not, they don't work anymore.
I didn't expect that one.
If you can see them coming, they don't work anymore.
That's right.
So this is some, and I'm just doing my thing, which is, let me try this on this victim. Let me use some cheese of moral outrage to see if I can comprehend or at least position something.
Right.
And so I said, what's the difference between, because she was saying why hurt someone's feelings or something like that. I said, what's the difference between abuse, punishment, discipline, training, right? Abuse, punishment, right?
Yep.
Discipline, right? Then training and education. And what was the one? Right? Then there's negotiation. And then there's mollification, wishful thinking, magical thinking, and faith healing.
Okay.
Right? These are all, I don't think
Wait,
that
no.
matters. It's probably wishful thinking. It's probably faith healing, wishful thinking, magical thinking.
Yeah.
So what I said is that's basically the spectrum of behavior modification. Somebody asked me, well, what's that mean? And I'm like, that's the spectrum of behavior modification. Now the question is, are we trying to modify your behavior truthfully and reciprocally, or are we trying to modify your behavior falsely and irreciprocally? Technically speaking, true and reciprocal, false and reciprocal, the same thing, but whatever. I have to put them both in there because some people don't grasp the meaning. So that's the spectrum. Now, great. So what we have is that behavior modification can be, as you were bringing up earlier, that it can be reciprocal or irreciprocal. The same way, now, but a lot of these techniques are a merger of three of the different axes, which is the male and female means of coercion or influence or deception, right? And their means of storytelling, social construction, empathizing, systematizing, etc. versus systematizing. Okay. So there's this intersection between those things, what we're trying to do, whether it's reciprocal and irreciprocal, and the method of which it's taught. In other words, all right. And so I think the reason this has become confusing is normally we're pretty good with trifunctionalism and we're okay with supply demand curves, but there's actually three. There's a couple, like you brought up earlier, there's a triangle of irreciprocity and triangle of reciprocity. Right.
Right. So there you can look at it from an ethical frame that has an ethical axis.
Right.
Or reciprocal and irreciprocal.
Yes.
On that triangle.
So we want to create, this is how we create the diamond.
That's it.
Right. This we know we've needed a diamond. We just, yeah, because irreciprocity is the equivalent of collapse, right? Technically,
collapse is to a point in chaos, absolute
right,
chaos.
Right. Yeah, because that's the point of defection, right? So you get to defection, then you get to boycott. So that's the collapse, right? That's the collapse of energy, right? So that's how we get there. Is now we've got the technique, which is deflationary and neutral. We've got male systematizing, female empathizing, and then the bottom direction is collapse, chaos, and that is how we bring in the irreciprocity.
What's interesting about this is that it looks to me like is there if you put
that's way clearer.
If you put the ethical axis as it's also time oriented, where the present is the triangle, male female equilibrium of the moment. It originated in chaos and just bullshit and trying to figure it out, and it increased to the present and aims at the future, which is the ethical axis, which can be the distortion of reality by, I call social construction, perhaps. The distortion of the ambitions of the equilibrium by interested parties by lying deviates the actions of people in the real world because it distorts their perception of reality. It biases it to serve someone's interests that are not, and causes them to pay costs that they wouldn't otherwise pay.
Okay, so this gets us out of the simplifies illustration a bit. Yes. Okay. I knew this is going to take me it's going to take me some noodle time.
That's good.
I can't, I see two ways of representing it, but it doesn't matter. The once we represent it with a visual, I'm just trying to make sure the audience understands. I'm not one of these things people is doing like magic triangles or magic, I mean, I'm not interested. I'm just trying to create a visual model that helps you index something rather than trying to remember all these fucking words, right? I mean, it's just
No, we're not
way,
chanting this. This is no chant.
right? So, and we're not trying to, so the problem is whenever you have a concept, you can use Brad's making fun of Venn diagrams, right? Which are sets rather than states, right? Than operations. We're trying to figure out how do we represent, like I said, most of what we do is supply demand curves. But there's all of a sudden, there's three supply demand curves, right? There's the triangle is basically an equilibrium, which most people have seen a triangle chart by now where the dot moves, around the center of the triangle, which is 3 dimensions instead of a graph where the dot, right, moves inside it, right? So we're trying to figure out how to represent these relations so that it's easy to remember them and compare them visually, because it's so much easier to do that. Like for me, I've been chanting these sequences for fucking ever, right? So it's one thing, but even for me, the ability, once we put everything into triangles, right, it's just so much easier to say it's that kind of triangle and whatever, because the visual index actually is like a graph. It's just a graph, right? You want to see a graph? We're showing you a graph. The difference is the graph isn't 2 dimensions. It's for 3 causal axes, right? And so now we're trying to say, okay, now when the difference is when there's 3 causal axes, now we've got reciprocity and negotiation and irreciprocity, right? And we've got the 2. Well, okay, that makes perfect sense, right? And I'm just sitting here saying, okay, is this really one of those things where it's we can represent it as a diamond in 2 dimensions, which I want, or do we actually have another 3-dimensional model where it's, and I think we've got it to where it's a 2-dimensional model, and I think I can explain everything on that diamond without resorting when I can make a very clear illustration of not only the neutrality of the reciprocal deflationary grammars, but the conflation, the merger at the bottom of the inflationary grammars. In other words, yes, I think it's really easy to represent the systematizing and the empathizing merging at the bottom in collapse, which is the merger of systematizing and empathizing into the maximum means of deception possible by all dimensions.
Right.
You see where I got it to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's what we needed to do. Well,
absolutely unethical.
Right, but that's what we got to, and so that's baiting into hazard. Right, that triangle, that bottom of the triangle, is baiting into hazard. Now, some of it, right? So I think we've got the diagram now to visually explain the relationship between these things.
Yes.
That we've been looking for, because it's like we know there's something not right, right? And I knew starting today, I'm like, do I finally understand this well enough to be able to talk to Brad about it so it can help me work? Because I'm having a hell of a time. And every time I stare at this stuff, I just go, I don't know what to do. I know. But I know if I try to explain it.
That's right. You're going to mansplain it to me, right?
Well, it's not that. It's that
just making shit up.
We'll go back and forth on it. And you'll point out my obvious failures.
Oh my. Oh my.
And we'll get there. So I think that's the right answer. That really does finish the problem because really what we're talking about is cooperatively in a diamond, right?
Yes.
You've got energy accumulation and energy
Theft.
theft, and that's it. I think it's that
Oh, yeah,
simple.
yes, defection is
The problem I didn't get to was the thing you sort of provided the insight into 2 weeks ago, which is that it's a merger of the Abrahamic methods, or the Marxist method is a merger of the male and female.
It's the beta males, man. Wait, look at this. It's been sitting on my desk for a couple of weeks, right?
Exactly.
And it's like it goes to destruction and chaos. And there's a if you do this graph, and I'm going to show it to you again, but because it's too hard to see it, it's too small. I have to make a bigger one. But okay, it's hard to see that. So the ethical axis up and down. There's family is positive, country is positive male, and negative is war and just chaos, just disorder.
It's social conflict.
That's
the one you
it.
got opposite of war is conflict. Social.
That's it.
That's
Internal.
social warfare
Internal.
versus physical warfare.
That's it.
Dude, that's rock solid.
There you
No,
have
no,
it.
use that. That's it.
That's it. I put it on there for the audience, right? And you. And it's like, what does that mean? Anyway. That's all I got.
So can you, for the benefit of the audience, you said something offline while we were offline, which I want you to hopefully, if you don't mind saying it, explain to the audience the leap that's happened to you. But you said I had to look at it for what it was, not for what it wanted to be.
It says,
explain. This is important because this is what I see as the problem when people look at the work. They want it to be what they want it to be, not what it is.
Yeah, they do. Of course they do. And it's like, it's just, here's you. The issue is the world is what it is and not what you want it to be. Right? And so accepting full responsibility for your account for your agency in that world fully for what it is, and accept that responsibility regardless of what you prefer, because your preference has nothing to do with the way this is built.
Right.
And it's okay. And
we're not telling people what is good. We're telling people what is true so they can choose a good, right? Because
based on your preferences. Yeah.
Based on your preferences. We're not telling people what's a good. And everybody wants us to confirm. That's what they've always wanted from me. Every faction wants me to confirm that their
good.
choice of good. I'm saying, well, they're all goods because they're not bads, right? All we can tell you is what's bad and false. When you have multiple choices of goods, then you have to come to agreement across those goods. It's easier for the left to do that because they don't need to be responsible. It's harder for the right to do it because they have to be responsible. But to be responsible, you have to have a way of systematizing the world so that you can understand how to be responsible for it. Well, if the men of the world systematize it differently by different rules.
That's how we do it. We all do it. That's how we do it.
That's how we do it.
We agree with other men on what's the system we're going to operate under here.
It's how do we organize responsibility, right? The problem is how I want to organize responsibility, how you want to do it, we all want to do it differently. The problem, so that's not how the left operates. They're trying to say, I want to organize irresponsibility, which is common. And so we're trying to organize responsibility. And the problem is that when we do that, that puts us into conflict. The left doesn't have necessarily conflict because they're not trying to organize for responsibility.
They're betas, man.
Right. So, well, I know that's that's reducing it. That's reducing it to a truth. But I'm trying to create an operational description so we can do something about it. So the problem on the right is we have a spectrum, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And everybody, and you have the, I vacillate between the Catholics are fucking horrible and the obvious evidence that they're not, right? I guess this something that exasperates the hell out of me, right? When I think about Protestants, well, I vacillate between the English Protestants, the Tories, for which Protestantism is like a garb rather than a belief, right? It's a cloak of moral whatever, but it's purely secular, really, right? The religion is just and the Protestantism of the Germans, which is a passion, right? I mean, there's, and then you have like the fascists. I'm like, well, politically, you're sort of right on these things, but I mean, nobody's going to listen to you because I wouldn't want to have you in charge of my fucking folding my laundry, right? I mean, you're just too inconsiderate of all the variables to be put in charge, so you reduce things to simplicity, right? I mean, the fact that ethno-nationalism is the optimum political model is just a fact, right? I mean, I don't have a problem with that part, but that doesn't mean you're capable of being in charge of this particular ethno-nationalist universe, right?
Okay.
And then you have the civic nationalists, which I used to view as faith healers, right? And then you have the Christian constitutionalists, which are like the adults in the room and they're quiet. They never say anything, and which makes me exasperated.
All right. But they're quiet because they're like this. They truly do get this equilibrium that you're talking about. The Christians that are quiet, they're quiet and they're about hit their limit of forgiveness.
Yes.
So that is evident to me by my conversations with my patients. Okay, which is to say, in private conversations among people that trust one another, they're signaling that they're at the limit of their forgiveness for this nonsense of the lies.
Yes.
And the ethical order will be reimposed.
Yes.
That's all. So now that we've hashed that out, it's the
well, now I know how to talk about it.
We know how to talk about it.
How to talk about it. Now that's the big picture.
Right.
In other words, now we know how to present the story visually so that people can see causal axes and how things fit together. This is really important because it's really too complex otherwise. What?
It's easy to get lost in the trees, man. It's just a forest though, and it's shaped like a diamond.
Yeah. So now the next problem is, okay, so I still want to know, I don't think it's possible to talk about the female and the male in parallel, except at a high level.
Yes.
I'm not sure I can go through the male and the female in parallel because I'm not sure because frankly, the female is a lot more elaborate.
It's because it's not systemic. It's systematic. Right. It's not systematic. It's
there's a common set of rules, but it doesn't map to the kind of systems men use. We both deny, right? We both engage in denial. But the way they use storytelling and we use argument, at that level, that's about as precise, I think. I might get into it and find out, fuck, it's 1-to-1, right? But right now, I'm just struggling.
Because it's like, I drew it like this. I drew it, it's emotion versus reason. And it's like, both will use both.
Yeah, but okay, let's take an example.
Okay.
You're right. Both will use both, but I'm saying the complexity of the spectrum of sophistry to idealism to philosophy, and the spectrum of magic to pseudoscience to mathematical pseudoscience, and the spectrum of occult to mythicism to theology. Those three spectrums, right, are fairly well understood.
Okay.
Right. All right. But when I get into the female method, which I'll show you in a second, the male escalation path with those, I just gave you the 3 dimensions and the male escalation path, which is a vertical path, right? I mean, it's from magic to pseudoscience to mathiness, right?
Yep.
This is just the male way of lying. Now, we don't think of it as the way of lying because we've been doing it so long, right? We just consider it error.
Okay. Just call it an error.
But it's really lying.
Okay.
It's a pretense of knowledge.
We call it error. We call it error to make ourselves feel better about it.
Whereas on the female side, we could do the same thing. We call it deception, or we could say it error. The difference is we're not familiar with it.
So go the female path of escalation. Will you define it for me?
I'm going to go pull it up now, if that's okay.
That'd be perfect.
Where are you? Kurt, hello?
Wait.
Yeah, I know. I do the same. Why did I get
There's
that?
a reason I'm doing it.
You're so mean. Pick on the autistic guy. It's okay.
It's just rude.
No, it's
I want you to know I'm trying to be as rude. I'm trying to become as rude as you are.
you know, I've
You're a role model, sir.
no, I've done that before in board meetings.
There we
I said,
go.
you know, picking on me as for being the autistic guy is not proposing an argument, right? Okay, so where am I? I've got the wrong one. There we are. Logic proofs. Let's go down to falsehood. Seats. Where's the female escalation hierarchy? Right. Faith healing, storytelling, false prompt.
I'm looking at killing versus murder.
You are?
Yes, sir.
You're supposed to see how,
I know. That's why I told you.
you know, I don't understand why these things happen.
Damn,
Share screen. That killing versus murder is part of my piece on the court's decision on
Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade.
There we go.
Hierarchy of cognitively feminine.
That's right.
All right. So faith healing, storytelling, false promise. I don't know if that's right. Pill pull. Yes, it is. False promise, pill pull, critique, evasion, social construction, and this is sedition. Is there? I can't tell whether my eyes are fuzzy or I got 2 eyes there. Right. All right. So this is the scale. So the problem is that women's method scales this way, and men's method scales the way by the 3. That's such an obvious thing when you say it, that the female's method scales together and the male method scales by different forms of systematizing. But all this is just the spectrum of mollifying to undermining to social destruction. So there's 2 different scales here. And so the reason I don't feel I can bring them together is that they actually, it's like we brought up earlier, it's horizontal versus, rows versus columns. It's female horizontal, which is how this works, and male columns, which is the other way around. So whenever I try to talk about these things, I'm like, I don't know how to show them at the same time. I can explain that we're going to go through rows and columns, right? And I can explain it now that we know what the diamond is. And then I can show how how these methods of deceit eventually unify into both into the systemization of social constructions, right? I can show how that happens, but I don't know how. I don't think I can pair them off like I did. I don't think I can do it this way or like we did earlier. In other words, I think I can only take this I can only take this to the pyramid level. From the pyramid level, I think I have to describe the masculine and the feminine. I think it's easier to do the masculine first, and then the feminine, and then the merger. In other words, I don't believe I can do them in parallel. Because while these things are,
they would fit like that. I didn't honestly think it was going to work, to be honest with you.
well, you could have told me that before I fussed about it for a month.
Sorry, brother. Because it's like they're operationally discrete.
Well, hell, they're opposites.
Yeah, they what's interesting is though the men, the beta men are attempting to organize the feminine storytelling. They're trying to create fictionalisms that explain it sufficiently well to allow the population to allow them to stay in charge.
So are you saying it's just a stupid fucking hierarchy like everybody's always said of aristocracy, church nobility, martial aristocracy, church nobility, and the man and the freemen and the peasant, the women and the peasantry? Are you just saying that it's just the normal trifunctional order that we've always had, right? And that, I mean, that's all you're saying is it's a class structure. In other words, it has to be that way because the class structures vary in responsibility by those means. This is a responsibility hierarchy.
But the issue is that,
and you have to talk downward.
They're trying to create stories. I mean, I watched The Philosophers Go, and they're attempting to generate a story that explains it sufficiently well to keep everybody happy and avoid conflict and keep getting paid.
Yes.
That's all that's happening here.
Doesn't that piss you off? Does it piss you off? No, because you're a realist. You're like,
I don't care. I don't care. Because it's like this.
Yeah.
So you got to understand, I work with my associate who's a Marine sniper, and he cares less than I do. And he looks at this work that we're engaged in as when you're ready, break the glass, right? To let the demon out.
Yep.
To do his work, and he needs the proper justifications to be in place.
Yes.
And the story to be square and ethical and understandable. So it's like this. So it's like what the men require is permission from the women or demand from the women for the authority to be exerted.
Yes.
That's all. And the women have the women on the right are of the mindset with their forgiveness has been exhausted.
Yes.
And so we're codifying it in this work. We're just codifying the reality of the situation. But there are men on the left who are still mollifying.
Oh, it's profitable.
Yes, this is profitable. And so it's okay. So, but promises have been made that cannot be paid, and pain is coming for everybody. And so that generates the impulse to change. And the people who have profited from the thievery before wish to stay in charge and not be reformed.
Of course.
And there's a effort being put forth to put forth false fictionalisms in a systematic method to cause the system to be reformed in a manner that is static for the people who have already profited from their thievery.
Yes.
Which is, this doesn't matter.
So do we know how to do this now? We do. The reason I couldn't figure out how to do it is
I had to let you do it. I had to let you bounce your head off the wall.
You're such a dick.
It just had to, because I'm
No,
like,
I mean,
I'm gonna let you explore it, because it's like, you're gonna do it the way you do it. And my job is to just encourage you to do it.
Well, that's why I couldn't figure it out, because you can't do it that way.
You proved it. You proved it.
Well, why wasn't it obvious earlier? It's because I was stuck on it. I was stuck on my prior organization.
That's all. You have to overcome your own inertia.
Yes.
I can't do it for you. So your bias has now been shattered, right?
I don't think it, yeah, okay.
What's your value structure? Because you're like, you did this work and you value it, and it's like, okay, you had to reshuffle it, and it's like, okay.
I just based it on presumptions that turned out to be false, and it was only through disambiguation of all those presumptions that it becomes clear that that doesn't work. Now, I know in the back of my mind, I knew something isn't right, but I couldn't figure it out. I knew if I just sit here and talk to you, I'd figure it out.
There you go.
Which is why we do these things.
That's just why we're here. So we call these male systematized lies error. We don't have a name for these female methods.
Well, I mean, they're errors as well. The difference is
they're emotional errors.
Actually, either is that I usually disambiguate mistake from error. Error means calculation, mistake means misunderstanding. I usually disapply. There's something different here. Or something. It's more like there was a failure of disambiguation on the female side. Reprioritization. It's a they're mistaken, right? It's more of a mistake, because in order to make an error, you have to calculate. That means you have to systematize. Women don't systematize, or the feminine mind doesn't systematize. So it can't make an error, so to speak. It can only be mistaken. So women are mistaken because they're not systematizing. But there's probably a better word for what they're doing, which is it's more like they're biased than mistaken. It's more like the bias is bias.
It's an indulgence.
That's probably the extreme. That's like the difference between, it's probably bias and indulgence versus mistake and error. I think that's probably the axis we want to use. Does that make sense? Bias and indulgence versus mistake and error.
Yeah.
Yes. That's actually a really good dichotomy, spectrum. You're not reacting, and I'm like,
no, I'm writing it down and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, okay. Just because I'm like, that's an interesting the terms are interesting. But there's a errors of ration and errors of emotion.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, empathizing is empathizing and emotion, reason and systematizing. And so the problem is, of course, is that you can be mistaken, which is pretty easy, or you can make an error, right? How do you represent the same thing in emotion? You can be biased or you can be indulgent. I just like the word indulgent because it really captures the problem, right?
Well, because it's a right. The indulgence.
These are both examples of biases, right? But they're empathizing versus systematizing biases, and I really like that comparison because it's basically a failure of due diligence, right? If you're making a systemic error, it's a failure of due diligence, and if you're making an emotional indulgence error, you're engaging emotional indulgence is a failure of due diligence. No, they're both failure of due diligence and empathizing versus systematizing. So I just like that failure of due diligence as this spectrum. And I like that it's almost, I'd like to have 3 words instead of just 2, like mistake and error. It might, versus bias and indulgence. There's probably more work we can do to get each side into a 3, or at least find a middle position.
Right. So there, yep.
All right, there's something we could do here, which is probably due diligence, mistake, error, due diligence, bias, indulgence. There's something along those lines that would fit this spectrum that would describe the error in the different cognitive differences in severity. I knew that if we did this, why does it take me so long to get here? It's so fucking frustrating.
Oh,
What?
fuck me, I don't know. I don't know. I just work here too, brother. It's just like work. I'm sorry, I cursed.
It's just like just some of these things. It's like
it's a slippery eels.
right? To me, I honestly, it's like everything else I don't do. I throw shit in the back of my head.
That's
and
right.
It fucking bakes.
Stew.
And when the goddamn timer goes off, it goes off, and I feel like I have no control over it.
That's correct.
And so it's just like I tell people, there's a difference between work, creative work, and procedural work. And the problem with the work I do is that it's creative. I can't. There's nothing I can do to make it go fast.
You can't speed it up.
I can't. The only thing I can do is like when I get so I can, I feel like there's a pattern.
That's right.
That I can see. I can talk to you about it.
Then you can articulate it.
And I can, the act of trying to articulate it, because you're a real person. You're not me talking to myself in my head.
No, that makes it much easier, doesn't it?
It does. No, it's like talking to God, all right? I mean, it's the same function, right. Except that that God's not going to, God's going to tell you the uncomfortable. But I sit there and I go through it and I'm like, I just can't make it happen any faster. The only thing that matters, like this morning I woke up, I had a headache because I didn't have enough coffee yesterday. So, I went out and I got some coffee and I went back and I'm like, I got to be ready for Brad to talk about this today. So I sat here and I went over this. I'm like, how the heck am I going to talk about this with Brad so that I get somewhere? Because it's right there and I can't figure it out. So you know what I did? I had my cup of coffee. I went back to sleep. In 10 minutes, I set the alarm. I set the alarm for 10 minutes before the call. I got up 10 minutes before the call. I looked at it again and say, yeah, okay, oh, great. And I don't know, coffee dark chocolate almond. I don't know.
Nice.
And all I can say is most of the time the answer is I'm ready to talk about it because it's back in there, and I want to talk about it. And the only variable appears to be, am I slept and fed? Right? I mean, I don't know. I just wish I had better control over it.
Well,
It's like that's why I want to be near you. Is that I just feel like it would be like every day Brad comes home from work to find Kurt knocking on his door to say, here's what I thought about today. Can you help me work through this? And driving you absolutely nuts.
All right. That'd be all right. That'd be all right, man. It's like it's just work. And I don't mind the work. I enjoy it. I do enjoy it. And I find it to be very helpful, is it allows me to organize my thinking about the way the world is put together in a manner that allows me to be more productive in my efforts at other things.
I find it makes the world extremely simple. Because all of a sudden you look at people and you listen to them like, oh, you're making this error and that error and that error. And it's okay. Really, and it's okay. Right. And do I really want to put the effort into correcting your error? Do you want to be corrected?
That's it. That's it. So that goes to my.
Is there any profit for me in doing that?
There you go. See, I'm a physician. I try to help people.
Yes.
And some people goes to my uncle, the psychiatrist, who told me everything's hypnosis, right? He also told me this. It's a psychiatry joke.
How old is your uncle?
He will be in his 80s. He's deceased.
Okay.
And he said this to me. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? And I said, I'm told the answer is 1, but I really believe the answer to be 0. But the light bulb must really want to change itself. Right? And it's like this, if the light bulb doesn't want to change, no psychiatrist can change it.
So true.
And so it's like, how much is it worth to change the light bulb? And the light bulb doesn't have to want to change. I don't need to change it. And me messing with the light bulb at all is going to cost something because I don't care.
So, you said, here's what I've learned though. If you're in a social construct with people and you're of our persuasion, which is you understand the truth and put truth before face. And if you just insert your unwanted opinion, it will be rejected.
That's right.
If you stay on the other hand, if someday you actually want to understand what's going on there, I explain it to you in about 5 minutes and you'll understand what's happening is rational. But I'm not going to tell you unless you ask me.
That's right.
Right. And it's surprising how often people will say, actually, I want to know. And as long as you're explaining it as people following rational incentives, not people with evil intention, they usually understand. I've been surprised. It's just surprising when you make it their choice. Right? You have to do 2 things. You have to make it their choice, and then you have to say it amorally, which is you have to say
not judgmentally. Yes,
not judgmentally. People are just following rational incentives. So they'll say, well, that's terrible, whatever. But so how would we change their incentives? Right? Almost always, everybody of every, it's like, I was talking to this, I think I brought this up before, this very passionate feminist liberal. And she said, you'd make a great king. And I'm like, and no, she understood because that's all I was doing, was saying, I'm explaining things as rational incentives. So how would you change incentives? I'm not blaming. People just do what's in their interest. If you create malincentives, they'll pursue them. I mean,
of course.
And it was really surprising to hear her say that to me, because it was the last thing I would have expected a woman like that
right
to say to me. Right? We're talking about your little blonde, educated, class liberal feminist, of my generation. I mean, and so, yeah. My generation, the generation after mine, yeah. But anyway, same thing, right? And I'm like, the thing is, that's actually what people want. People don't want to be told someone else is right.
That's right.
They just want to be told how that person is thinking. And I'm saying, yeah, but explain their incentives. This is how you get across the border to liberals, is that they want to they need to empathize, but they can't empathize unless they understand. Like the minute you explain that what men are really looking for is mindfulness, self-image, by having responsibility, and that's all that's going on, and that the dance between men and women is to give men responsibility,
Yes.
so that they feel valuable, right? I mean, it's a stupidly simple exchange. Once you see that's going, they can understand. The problem is when you just say things are right and wrong, they don't work, right? It's frustrating. So my experience with people is stop trying to give people your opinion on values and start giving people explanations of cause that they can empathize and sympathize with. See, I used it the right way. I almost used it backwards that time. They want to be empathize, feel, and sympathize, think like the other person does. Well, just reduce it. This, when I remember talking to the people at Mises Institute back in the day, I was like, I use this all the time, but it's because the theory of incentives is basically how you need to operationalize the world for people's understanding, right? And Austrian economics is basically the theory of incentives. That's all it is. It doesn't have anything else to do with it. It's the operational analysis of economic transactions.
Right.
Right. And the freshwater Chicago school is saying, how do we insure people given that they're frail? And then this saltwater or the mainstream economics is, how do we manipulate these people? So regardless of what's moral and ethical and whatever want, as long as it's in their, we think it's in their interest. Right. So those are the three spectrums of the economic schools. It's just, which thing do you think you're doing? Well, Austrian economics is closest to law. Saltwater economics is closest to classical liberalism, and mainstream economics or freshwater. It's Austrian freshwater saltwater. Saltwater economics is, which is New York schools, is real closest to progressivism. Right?
So they're manipulative.
They're manipulative. So I mean, it just, and of course, the difference is that you increase the depth of the business cycle as you move from Austrian to freshwater to saltwater, because what you're doing is you're creating greater amount of disinformation in order to accelerate consumption. So in the Austrian school, you're not accelerating; you're just describing social science. In the freshwater school, you're saying, how do we insure people against vicissitudes of disorganization? And the saltwater school, is, I always think of it as, how do we generate the maximum amount of hazard? In other words, the maximum amount of consumption despite the hazard, and we'll figure it out later. You know, I'm like, I don't know how many times, this is like one of the most common things that people read of mine on Quora. And I always think it's kind of interesting. How many times that comes up, but it's really it's really that simple. Disambiguation into causation by serialization and operationalization. Well, I mean, what did I just talked about in economic schools? It's just,
what's interesting to me is it's those three things are different by frequency.
Correct.
Which is like the saltwater school operating at very low frequency.
Well, again, I want to say Austrian saltwater, freshwater.
Right.
Excuse me, Austrian freshwater, saltwater. Right. So Austrian, Chicago, New York.
Right, but it's like the New York guys are operating this very long wavelength.
Correct.
And the Austrian guys are operating at the extremely short wavelength.
Correct. And the middle guys are operating at a middle wavelength.
Right, and it's but it's there's a continuum there, and it's based, and there's a functionality there associated with the lies they tell or the stories that are necessary to perpetuate those functions?
I think the only one that's lying is the saltwater, is the long wave. And that's because they're saying until 2008, there was a there was a resistance. Basically, in 2008, there were only two requirements that you had to fulfill in order to be an Austrian. The primary one was the theory of the business cycle. In 2008 proved the business cycle. So the Austrians were proved to be right. Right. And so basically at this point, everything's been fully Austrian economics has been fully integrated into mainstream economics with the the problem is that what the people like Stiglitz and Krugman and all these saltwater idiots, progressive idiots are about, is like I could
that was sufficiently rude. Thank you.
I could make like I said, I considered before I started doing this, making my effort not about law, but about economics, because that was really what my thing was, my shtick was, right? And so the problem is that I realized that the complexity and frequency of the lies of people like Krugman, Stiglitz, and DeLong to explain their lies required me to do all this work, right? Because their lies are really rich and deep, and you have to be able to falsify them. But all they're doing is saying, kick the can down the road, we'll figure it out later.
Right.
And what the Austrian is saying, never fucking kick the can down.
Don't kick that can.
Right. And the Chicago people is saying, well, people can't help the fact.
You have to kick the can.
No, people can't help the fact that there's stickiness in an economy. Right.
So how do we make it? How do we make it so that it doesn't blow up on our feet?
Well, how do we make it so that when the stickiness, the reorganization of happens because there's stickiness in an economy, that we mediate the reorganization of the economy from state A to state B. That's all it is. It's insurance. But Keynesian, new Keynesian, or mainstream economics, but what they're saying is ideal. And then they'll say that they're not doing this, but what they're really doing is ignoring the business cycle. And the way they explain it is they explain it that, yeah, but in the end, it's still better. I'm like, you can't, you're using that as a graph, but who are you accounting for? You're saying that additional consumption here makes in other words, the raise in consumption that's possible is the measure, right? That what, instead of what could have happened if you hadn't raised that consumption instead, right? I mean, what would have happened if you hadn't done that, and we had more organized investment in long-term capital production, right? And so it's like, I can say this to you now, and the knowledge you have, you can understand what I'm saying. But I mean, you try to talk to these people, and
I know
it's like they're idiots.
I know.
And you know what it is they believe they're doing good. And that's the problem. It's mathiness and faith.
They do believe they're doing good. Everybody believes they're doing good. Nobody believes, unless they're waging war on somebody.
Yes.
Then they believe they're doing good if they're engaged in civil discourse and civil behaviors, in what they believe is civil behavior, even if it's remarkably warlike and not civil in its functionality. It's usurpation of sorts, which is what I'm referring to, that specifically the Marxist efforts, I would call them the Frankfurt School work, is they admitted in their works, James Lindsay found it, which was they admitted they were destruction of norms that people,
right, because they think it's possible for the feminine norm to survive, when all of history says there is no example of that surviving, because people don't share those incentives and wants that you think they do. They will always pursue reproductive maximums, which is hypergamy, type status, consumption, signaling, whatever. They will never stop that. The only reason you think those things are good is because you're actually powerless. And so you want those things which suit your state, but you don't understand that you're in that state because of you, and you find those things good because you're in that state. But if you're in a different state, you would find different things good, and you would justify those things differently. So, I mean,
because of this, it's seeking indulgence.
correct.
Right?
I love that insight. That was a really good term. I just want to point out that we've been on our 3-hour.
Oh, you're getting tired? Are you getting wiped
Well,
out?
I'm actually fine because the Italian coffee and the dark chocolate almonds did their job to me today, but also because this is incredibly inspiring for me, because this has been frustrating me for a couple of months now, because I just could not figure out how to get it across. Well, the answer is because you can't do it that you can't get there from here, right? As they say in Maine, you can't get there. So now that I feel like we can do it, I can talk about it. What I like even more is I can talk about the female method and the male method, and then I can talk about what I really object to, which is the unification as a single thing, as the unification of them, and I'm avoiding the blame that you like me to avoid. Does that make sense?
It's very like failure of judgment. You're not being judgmental,
Just
descriptive.
right. Which I gotta tell you, I realize you won.
Shit.
All right. And the audience has to realize.
Oh, shucks, Kurt.
And the audience has to realize that Brad won.
Because I did this months ago, man.
And he's proud of winning. I'm just letting you guys know he's proud of winning.
I'm proud. I want you to know I take little joy in being as right as I am, Kurt.
Oh, no, you take plenty of joy in it. I'm quite sure.
I do. I enjoy myself. It's okay. It's okay.
All right.
Just I'm glad to have the opportunity to work with you on it. To be honest.
Well, okay. So now my basic frustration is I really want to continue working on this like tomorrow, and that can't happen. So how am I going to make that happen?
I can work in the afternoon, but it'd be late for you. Like, it'd be late for you. It's like I get done with my work in the office. Probably I can begin again at 5 p.m. your time. Well,
it would be nice if you have the energy, just like ping me on Signal.
I will.
And maybe I'll have the brains for it. Maybe I won't.
Either way,
but I'm right inspired right now, so to speak.
Perfect. That's
all
right.
This was again, I want to thank you. This was a big deal for me because this is like the third major frustration event I've had to overcome.
Speed bumps.
Yeah. All right. Love you, brother. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. And everybody hit like and subscribe. And all the buttons, and leave the comments.
Leave comments. Tell us what you learned, etc. It matters a lot to me.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Kurt.
Bye.